Shalom, everybody, and welcome to the Yishai Fleisher Show, broadcasting live from Judea to the world. You're a part of it wherever you are. Happy Tu B'Shvat from the land of Israel. It's Jewish Arbor Day. It's the day of the land and of the trees and of the tithes, and basically recalling the majesty and the beauty of the fact that our sages tell us that the land of Israel, when it flourishes, that means that redemption is at hand, and we are indeed seeing that. Tu B'Shvat is also the Yortzeit, the memorial day of my grandfather, Mordechai ben Yaakov, who was both born on Tu B'Shvat and passed away on Tu B'Shvat, and so therefore Tu B'Shvat is an important day for our family, and it's so great to be sharing it with you. So I have good news and bad news. The good news is that there's great content. The bad news is that there's a lot of it today, and I know that you're busy, and I know that you have a life to live and lead and do stuff. Still, though, this is probably like a 3-hour show today. What can I do? First, we have Rav Mike Feuer, in which we have a great discussion with him about the Torah portion of Beshalach, and that includes the Exodus and the splitting of the Red Sea. I mean, that's a lot of stuff, but it keeps going with the manna and then the battle with Amalek. So we had to cover those issues and topics. Couldn't skip out on them, so bear with us, but it's great stuff and a great discussion. And then afterwards, I debate Malkon, a self-described Palestinian who is actually a Jerusalem resident, but is of Armenian and Coptic descent. So he's an old stock of Middle Eastern peoples, a Christian, and we have a very interesting discussion. He's well-spoken, and we have a great debate on the great debate hosted by Adar Weinberg. So check that out. It's really something special. Now, for all of you Tu B'Shvat lovers like myself, please go to my social media, which is both on Twitter and Facebook and on YouTube, and you could find my live Tu B'Shvat Seder with Malkon Fleisher, which was just such a hit yesterday, so awesome. And we have wine and fruits, and the whole thing is done with you and for you, and the atmosphere and the feeling of the land of Israel, I hope, comes through the screen and through the sound. And it is just such a pleasure to have you be part of the story with us. And that's exactly what the show is about. So without further ado, let's get to Rav Mike Feuer talking to us about Beshalach, the Exodus bus, movement of people leaving Egypt, getting the Torah, coming to the land of Israel, and making Jewish history happen. Here's Rav Mike Feuer. Shalom, everybody, and welcome to the Yishai Fleisher Show, broadcasting live from Judea to the world. You're a part of it wherever you are. Shalom and welcome to our studios in the land of Israel. And we are joined by our beloved Rabbi Mike Feuer, Rav Mike, who's rocking it with us for the Torah portion, the politics, and the feelings of, I guess, broadcasting the reality and the blessings of the Holy Land. Rav Mike, shalom and welcome. Tell me how you're doing.
Shalom. Well, with an introduction like that, I'm not really sure. I mean, broadcasting reality, it's a big task. But yeah, thank God, happy to be here.
It's interesting you say that. It's interesting you say that. I just want to pause on one thing, which is, I've said this on other shows, and I've been really trying to practice this. I'm really feeling that we're dealing in a time where one of the most expensive commodities, because of its rarity, is truth. And I have asked my friends.
Expensive, you mean precious then?
Precious and rare.
But because expensive makes me a little edgy, but okay, I'll let it go.
Okay, what I mean by expensive is...
The truth is not for sale, but I hear it. It was precious and rare. Precious.
And you know what I meant? I meant to say valuable. That's what I meant.
Precious.
Yeah, precious. That's right. And my good friend Mark says hello. Mark Pickles, great article in the Times of Israel. Mark, great job to you. The thing about truth right now is that it's a very rare commodity and therefore precious. And what I've asked my listeners and I've asked of myself recently to do is to really be very, very careful to speak only truth. Like this is a Kutzker type thing, right? Like to really speak only truth. And what I mean by that is, even if you heard something, you say things like, well, I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard from this kind of source like this. What do you think of that? As opposed to saying with clarity, oh, the vaccine is dangerous or something like that. Just to be very careful and cautious not to throw out there untruths.
to really speak it, because we need right now, and I think everybody will respect so much right now if we all just commit to being like, no, we're people of truth, not people of throwing around opinions and masquerading as truth, just to speak kind of with clarity for one another and create a different atmosphere. What do you think about that?
Well, at the risk of Xing us both out of a job, I think that actually the world would be served by a lot more quiet. Meaning, like, that's what came up for me when you said speak only truth. I'm thinking, wow, then 98% of what's said today just goes away. Mm-hmm. And I do appreciate the sort of perspective you gave to what you meant in terms of a certain humility and lack of certainty. It's interesting to me to hear you say that, because in the past we've spoken about how certainty is a almost a feared and derided quality in discourse today, right? Because if you're certain about something, you must be a fanatic.
Right.
Now I hear you both calling for greater certainty, speak only truth, and yet, practically speaking, inviting people to be humble and even a little bit hesitant about their assertions.
Right.
I want to add one more thing, which is I think that truth isn't just precious today. I think truth is feared. Mm-hmm, I think that we have to appreciate that there's a lot of manipulation of the very real problems that postmodern consciousness pose to knowing truth. Very real problems, but there's a lot of manipulation of it to hide and avoid.
Last week, I want to riff back at you with something that you said last week, which is you said that saying that you have truth is, in postmodern language, a type of violence. And just to speak that out to people, it just means like, oh, you think you have the truth? That means that you're a fascist, fanatic, controlling, toxic masculinity, mansplaining, whatever these type of words that basically say like that. Oh, you've got this truth that you're like putting on me. You think you have the right. It's come to be understood as a type of violence in our modern society. You said that last week. I've been thinking about that all week. And
by the way, it's not an undeserved fear. Let's remember that modernity, the hallmark of modernity, was the certainty that led, sort of mass movements to slaughter people. Like, and the medieval experience with the religious truth is the same as well. But I sometimes feel at the risk of coming across like a racist, like it's like a Goyish and Narishkeit around truth. Like that level of like the madness. Like, okay, we get like absolute certainty is definitely idolatry, because there's only one thing that's certain. But the power of the Torah, which Kodesh Baruch Hu gave to us, is that it was given as an absolute truth knowingly to subjective creatures. Right? Like that's part of the manifestation of Torah in the world, is that we are subjective creatures. It doesn't change its truth. It changes our relationship to it.
Also, not being able to articulate what you would perceive as truth is also a kind of violence the other way. Meaning to say postmodern disaffection of like your personal truth. Okay, let's say you have your own truth and I have my own truth, but that doesn't mean I don't have my own truth. Don't invade my life and my truth and my society's truth, my historical truth. I have my identity, as Yehuda Cohen taught me to say. I self-identify as, and that's powerful. Meaning to say, that doesn't mean there's no truth. It means you don't have to respect my truth, but people do respect it when you speak truth. They want to hear in a truthless world. They want to hear somebody with truth, certainly, or at least somebody that perceives themselves as having truth. Certainly, we are very lucky. I want to give you an example today. I'm going to admit to everybody here that I indeed went today and got the first of the vaccine inoculation shots. I got one today. I barely even felt it, but and you know what?
I got mine right before the show last week. Actually, I remember.
I didn't. By the way, I didn't take a photo and a selfie of myself doing it. I think you know why? For one very selfish reason. I think everybody looks ridiculous in those pictures, so I wasn't going to subject myself to to that.
I'm not technologically equipped to do such a thing, so it wasn't really even.
I could have done it, but I didn't. I really didn't want to do it. But one thing I actually did experience a feeling of truth today. It was semi surreal. I walked in. I thought it was going to be like a quick line. It was a quick line, but there were a lot of people waiting, like my fellow townsmen and women from the town I live in here. Yep. They were more than lined up. They were sitting comfortably in a hall.
But I mean, I meant like they're pushing us through, man. We're all getting it.
Right. I'm sitting in this room, and I see all this room of like my countrymen, my townsmen and women, my co-religionists, most men with a kippah on their head, which really just means today, when you wear a kippah, it means like, yeah, I believe there's a God and I believe that there's a Torah. And I'm in this room with all these strangers, but they're not total strangers. Some people I know, some people I don't. And I got this feeling like I'm with my nation. We have our truth. Our truth is meshing with the world of modernity and science as much as it can. We're strong. We have a language. We have a Torah that we share, a godly Torah. And here we are in Judea in a nice modern facility, getting this ultra modern vaccine. Let's not get into if it's good or bad. And I felt this embrace, and I just turned to my beloved Malkon and I said to her, darn it, Israel's the best place in the world. There's just no other place I'd rather be, especially in comparison. And this is what I wanted to touch with you on, Rav Mike, with what I feel about America today, which I feel like the way I'm perceiving it from my lens from out here is that there's like not as much binding these people together as was when I was a kid. The underlying structures of the thing, let's say freedom, which was a big American value, freedom of speech, which was an important value. Like those things seem to me to be at least, if not undermined, at least polarized and not brought together under anything. And just kind of like, you're more of an autonomous individual there. And maybe even more, since if the American dream has been broken down, then the American individualism becomes hyper sensitized, and that's what you got. You just got individualism, lonely individualism.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many angles on that. First of all, you have to remember that Israel, as you yourself say all the time, is an ethnic nation state as opposed to the civic nation state model of America. When you, like you said, there's a tribal element that bonds us together. There's an ethnos here. We have, of course, others. There are, minority populations, etc. But it's very different in that respect. Also, caveat is that the American social fabric has had major rifts in it since its foundation. It's one of the things is that that bill is coming due right now. You look at pictures of America 50, 60 years ago, and there was a black-white divide where you could go to the water fountain and where you could sit on a bus, But I think most importantly, and this is the piece that we as Israelis, as well as Jews, but Israelis should take to heart, is that democratic states are founded on two fundamental principles, which is the respect of individual rights and some perception of common goods. I mean, it's always a balance between how we define common goods and where the boundaries between individual rights and common goods are. What's broken down in America is any real sense of a common good. And so therefore, it's not surprising to me that the hyper-individualism that you're speaking about finds its expressions in various ways. So the left is like, I as an individual can define my gender, my identity, my etc. The right is moving toward, I as an individual don't tell me what to do, and I don't have to wear a mask, and I can carry guns. And obviously those are gross stereotypes in both directions. But you understand that fundamentally they're expressive of the same problem, is that barring any common good for which I'm willing to curtail my individual rights. So why would I ever do individual right? Why would I ever put any boundary on it? And that's a recipe for dissolution. And like I said before, my only hope right now is that there's a peaceful dissolution, because I actually don't see the permanence of the union being what will bring health and well-being to the hundreds of millions of people in that immediate subcontinent, much less to the globe, where we all are in the same boat on some level. Oh, you're mute. Can't hear you.
Yeah, that was a little button of mine.
I want a button.
What you just said is, how do I say this the right way? Because I want to be living in my time, but also transcending my own time. The way that the world has been in our lifetimes, and for some years forward, is America is it's the superpower, and it's also the cultural superpower, and we're seeing it's leading less. Its influence is waning on one level or another, And on the one hand, as a Jewish person and as a Zionist, I say to myself, okay, Leom Melom Yamatz, the Jewish influence, the Jerusalem influence is rising, and therefore it has to be that Rome has to wane. That's just the math of it. That's just the kind of hardwired math of the system. And on the other hand, just as a person that has to live with economics, technology, and regional powers and regional security thinking, you have to understand that you kind of have to accept that we're probably going to go into a region, an era of less stability for a while until the powers, realign. And there are definitely here in our region, there are powers that are vying for regional control, regional strength. I think the two big powers that we see here are really playing hard is Turkey and Iran. And those are two ancient, I like to think of them as a kind of reinvented, a very ancient power.
Oh yeah. No, Iran much, by the way. Iran much older
than the Turks, but the area of
they give us the run for our money.
Right. But the area of the Turks is like the old Hittite power. There's something very ancient in these peoples and in this way. Maybe the peoples themselves switched out, but that Turkish power is an old power. Which PS controlled this region for 400 years.
Oh yeah.
Which
sometimes
is
with an iron hand.
Right. So they're vying for Israel, not yet vying for power per se.
Which is a mistake right now.
It might be a mistake. It might be a mistake. By the way, just can I give you a little parenthetical thing? I know your other show on on the Land of Israel Network is the Jewish Story, which is found at jewishstory.co or at ravmike.com. You've talked a lot about old modern Israeli history. One of the things that I've recently come across that I didn't understand was that in the Sinai Accords, in which after the 6-Day War, Israel conquered the Sinai for I think the second or maybe even third time in its history, and then after the Yom Kippur War, a few years later, went into the Sinai Accords. And finally gave away the Sinai to Egypt. So I was looking at the map of Sinai, and I'm looking down at the Straits of Tiran, which were famously closed by Nasser, that precipitated the war, the 6-Day War, right?
Sure.
I'm looking at the Straits of Tiran, which is the entrance into the Gulf of Aqaba, which is like after north of the Red Sea, it splits into two: Gulf of Suez, Gulf of Aqaba. The Gulf of Aqaba is the one that's next to the Sinai on the east side, and also it hits our port city of Eilat, right? So at the very bottom of this little opening called the Straits of Tiran, I noticed that there was these two little islands.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait a minute. So the big island, which is a tiny island, but the bigger one is called Tiran Island.
Yeah, Tiran, and the other one is.
And the other one's called something else, but it's like mamash like a sand spit. It's almost nothing. It's like nothing. But in any case, I'm like, wait a minute. And I called my mom, and then I verified it with some other people. I'm like, and then I looked it up in Wikipedia. I was like, did we hold Tiran Island? Did Israel control Tiran Island? The answer is yes.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait, so during the Sinai Accords, they gave away Tiran Island? And people were like, yes. I'm like, do you mean to tell me that we didn't hold on to this one tiny island at the very mouth of the place that was shut by our enemies? In negotiations, we couldn't have said, hey, you want the Sinai back? My opinion, it was a bad idea, but okay, you want to have it back, but we need this military control of this tiny little island so that we could patrol the whole Straits of Aqaba, the whole Gulf of Aqaba, and have a naval base on this little island so that it will never happen again, as in never again. And I was shocked that it was indeed given away, this little island to Egypt.
I hear it, but I think it's a misreading of the nature of warfare, especially naval warfare at that stage. I don't think that rock was going to make the difference. Meaning, the idea of blockading, even by 78, the idea of blockading the Straits of Tiran, whether we held that peace or not, was a different question. I mean, you're into an era of naval warfare, of missile-based naval warfare, and the level of air power that Israel wields, and the the depth of American presence, which is really what everything hinged on in the end of the day in the Sinai Accords. You put all those American observers, hundreds, in the heart of the Sinai, etc. That's what it all hinged on. It was all. So I hear your point in terms of like the dignity element.
If we had a base there, then we could still patrol. To this very day, we would have a much easier time dealing with.
I don't think so. I just don't think the distance is really that fundamental for unless you're going to build. You're talking about building
distance, you therefore have a right to. Port. Yeah, I'm talking about building a naval base, like a naval base that you go back and forth and patrol the whole darn thing because you've got a naval base at the end, and you're always sending your ships back and forth and ensuring.
It's not just holding onto one rock, and that's maintaining strategic control of the entire Gulf. I don't think that was going to fly in the Sinai Accords.
You know what? You know that. Well, yeah, and you know what? We so desperately today. You see, by the way, Greece turning towards Israel. Greece and Cyprus turning towards Israel and being like, okay, you guys help protect us from this Turkish thing. You see, basically the UAE, without saying it, I'm sure they're saying it behind the scenes, and even Saudi Arabia being like, Israel, you're the regional power player now. You're the local security chief. You got to push back on Iran. You got to have your subs in these waters. You got to be here. We need your presence here.
One of our subs did a surface selfie on its way through the Suez, just to like send a very clear message, just like, hey, let's just up Periscope for a minute and say hi. We're just waving, that old Stephen Wright. Remember Stephen Wright, the comedian? It's like every once in a while I like to stick my face out the window and look up and smile for a satellite photograph, right? It's like that's exactly what they did. They were like, we're just going to stop here and wave because we know you're watching.
That's right. Very, very powerful. All right.
All right, let's get to the Red Sea.
Speaking of the Red Sea, we are a bunch of Red Sea pedestrians in the first place, right? We have some history with the Red Sea. Some people, by the way, say that it was called the Reed Sea, and it's just like a misspelling.
Yeah, of course. I mean, Yam Suf is literally Reed Sea. I mean, the Red Sea is for sure So
can we just like go for Reed Sea, or like that's not cool?
No.
We can't just add an E. That's not going to happen.
No, you say to the average English speaker, and we cross the Reed Sea, and they say, where?
Sea of Reeds. All right.
Right.
Well, that's too bad. But anyway, we are dealing with the Torah portion of the actual Exodus. This is it. Okay, we're talking about the Exodus, and we're talking about Yad Ramah, the outstretched arm, the strong arm.
The high hand.
The high hand. That's right. The waving to the satellite. We're talking about the Torah portion of Beshalach, which is a mammoth Torah portion, which starts on chapter 13, verse 17, in the book of Exodus. And I call today's show, Get on the Exodus Bus, okay? That's right. And now the first thing we learn is that the Jewish people, as they left Egypt, they left armed. Chamushim alu bnei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim. And our sages tell us there's another way to read this, which is that only a fifth went out of Egypt and 4/5 got left behind. And so therefore we're saying 20% made it out of Egypt.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just hung up on the first thing. I don't know if it's the first thing, but it's pretty early on. I mean, yeah, listen, this is a pattern of Jewish history. We know this pattern. We know this pattern. And that's why I feel like the Midrash, Pshat is Chamushim, like Rashi says, Pshat is armed. Right. And he brings, I think, the proof and Unkelis, etc. And it makes sense in the context because, it says that God didn't take us Derech Eretz Plishtim along the sort of the Via Maris, the coastal road, because it would have been a battle from the word go, as opposed to a little bit of wander and eventual conquest, right? But this is a pattern in Jewish history. And the sages understood that, which is why they rightly read Chamushim as 1/5. Because the reality is when the historical moment comes, most of us are not ready. Mm-hmm. That's why we call it a historical moment for many sense. Like, because people get swept into it willy-nilly. Who knows, Others make a conscious choice to go with the moment. I think, as I mentioned before, I think of this all the time in the context of my grandfather, who in 1937 stowed away on a boat in Belgium, literally snuck on board, hid out with a friend to New York City. And the captain discovered him there, and they had to ransom the way off. They had family in the Lower East Side, classic story. But he got out, and his 10 brothers and sisters didn't, and countless others, obviously.
Right.
So, but everybody knew it was bad. What made him say, it's not just bad, it's over?
Yeah,
Right?
it's a type of
And the parallel to our day is, I think, Mivukash.
right. I mean, and you're talking, of course, about immigration to the land of Israel, choosing the land of Israel, and when there's a big war on, you're lucky if you have the sense to feel that history is turning, that this isn't just another thing, and
but by the time the war strikes, it's too late. That's my point.
Right. Well, I'm married to a Hungarian family. And Hungarians, I don't mean this in any disparaging way because I very much appreciate, love them very much. But like their tendency doesn't necessarily jump ship. It's you know what I mean. They're more
the hold fast type.
They're more hold fast type. That's I'm making a giant stereotype here, but it's true.
No,
so yeah.
It's a stereotype which got legs. You
know, but then you have some people who just have the sense like it's go time. It's time to go. And that was the other name I wanted to have for the show today, which is it's go time. And I think it behooves us right now. I just want to make a public service announcement to my fellow brothers and sisters living outside of the land of Israel. And here's the way I'm going to say it. It is obvious, and it should be obvious to you, that we invite you to live in the land of Israel. But I want to say it to you differently. If you've ever had the inclination to come and live here, if you ever thought about it, if you ever felt that feeling, think about that feeling again and ask yourself if this is the time to act upon that feeling. If you never had that feeling and you find these comments even offensive, most likely you're not even listening to the show anyway. But let's say you find these comments offensive.
Sorry, I'm willing to offend you.
Right, and it's not meant to be offensive.
No, but on some level, even if it is meant to be offensive, I feel like there's a certain life-saving element at the risk of being grandiose. Yeah. And I don't mean like there's an imminent destruction for American Jewry. I mean, this is where the future is. Right.
That's right. I'm telling you, I felt that today in a physical feeling while getting that shot with all of my
brethren.
Brethren and sisters there. Another man who certainly knew the flow of history and understood the times was Joseph. And Joseph, the reason I say that is because when he was in jail for 12 years and they called him to Pharaoh, he just shaved, showered, put on some new clothes, and he's ready to be number 2. Hey,
shave, shower, and put me on the stage.
Just put me in, coach. Just put me in, coach. Just give me the ball. You know, because winners want the ball when the game is on the line.
Yeah.
Anyway, we actually see the great Joseph come back here into this Torah portion, and that is very meaningful. Oh, and Elise Gross writes, getting my paperwork together. You do that, Elise, and we can't wait to see you here in the good land. I just want to also say Agnes says shalom from Indonesia. Shalom, Agnes. God bless you. And Edison says shalom from Indonesia. That's Edison. Do you know Agnes? Are you guys friends? You guys are both in Indonesia, both watching the show and saying shalom. You guys should know one another. If I could bring you guys together here, that would be great. And Lou Weiss says, are you both preparing a Tu B'Shvat Seder? As I mentioned before, I'm doing a Tu B'Shvat Seder live on this show here tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Israel time. Rav Mike, do you do one?
And we always make sort of a brachos party out of it, so to speak. Meaning there's always fruit and a recognition of the day and the brachot. But there's something about the Tu B'Shvat Seder that has never caught my spiritual imagination.
Okay, Beseder. You have speaking of spiritual imagination, your friend.
Hey, I know that guy.
That's right. Your friend in Chavruta, Analytics Ninja, says shalom from Yerushalayim. So shalom to you as well. A great man indeed. So thank you so much for joining us today. And let's go on and just talk about Joseph for a second. I find this to be one of the most romantic of verses. It says, Vayikach Moshe tatzmot Yosef imo. And Moses took the bones of Joseph with him. Ki hashbea hishbiya, right? Because he was made, there was an oath that Joseph made the Jewish people take. At Bnei Israel, they were inoathed. They had to take the oath.
Forsworn.
Le'emo, saying, Pakod yifkod Elohim etchem, when indeed God will call onto you or choose you or
God will. God will surely, it's going to happen.
Right, but I think that there's an implicit when. I think there's an implicit when that shall happen. Then, v'helitim etatzmutai mizeh itchem, and then that's what I mean. Then you should don't forget to take my bones with you.
Yeah.
from here with you. Okay, so you got to take my bones. You got to take my bones.
There's so much in this. I mean, there's so much in this. But one of the things that's been striking me this year as I read it is that this was the last oath binding them to Egypt. This was the last oath, and I think it's very important that Moshe had the presence of mind to fulfill the last thing really binding Am Yisrael to Egypt on the way out the door, so to speak. And I think it's also in terms of the comments we made earlier about Aliyah. I know for me that I attribute a lot of the success of my Aliyah, and it was not a simple process at all. This is the third iteration, to a sense that I did justice to the place where I came from. Mm-hmm. I didn't leave. Wasn't like Boet, I didn't kick on the way out the door, and I'm not for sure one of these people, not to speak down about America. I have my moments like everybody, but not like in a, God forbid, in a systematic way, right? And so therefore, I feel like I did justice to a place which did well by me. Yeah. And the reality is, for all we focus on the shi'bud, the subjugation and the slavery in Egypt, Egypt was a refuge to Yosef and Yaakov and his children in a time of real need, and was the womb that nurtured that family into a nation. I
think that's such an important comment you're making, because I come from a multicultural kind of background. My parents are Russian Jews, and to them, like, Russia, the country, was not good to them, but Russian culture was, and they take it with them. Speaking of Russian culture, I'm all fascinated by the Navalny, the saga that's happening in Russia right now. Yeah, I can't help but follow it.
I'm following from a very distant outsider perspective, but just the courage of the man. Let's just give credit to the courage of the man. Anybody's going to publicly take on, one of the world's top dictators is not a small feat.
This guy Navalny is one of the most courageous people I've ever seen. It's like a throwback to a different time. This kind of courage. Not by the way that I'm so sure that I would want to see Putin leave the scene, because I think Putin keeps a lot of anti-Semitism at bay, frankly.
It's a country that sometimes does best under a very firm management.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it just speaks like that when historically speaking, firm management.
Yeah. On the other hand, Navalny's got a point. That, like, some of the Tsar-like.
It's not a free country.
What's the word I'm looking for when you kind of take too much and you splurge too much?
Just gluttonous behavior.
Yeah. Gluttony is just excessive. It's excessive. On the other hand, really, I think Putin is for Israel is good, and so in our family we take with us Russian culture in a positive way, and so too with American culture. And I see that even with French Jews, they just take the good aspects of France and themselves being, here's a weird thing about Jews. We're always not those people, but we always super are those people. As you've quoted many times on your show, Jews are like everybody else, only more so. It's like,
yeah, exactly what came up for me when you said it.
Yeah, it's like we're really Russian in some ways. We're really French. We're really American. And we bring that stuff to Israel, which is in some ways like a beautiful thing.
Well, I mean, just from an aesthetic standpoint, it's one of the things that makes our country so fantastically diverse. I mean, to say Eretz Yisrael is Olam Katan is like a given, and it's a microcosm in so many ways. But I often, when we used to ride buses all the time, right, I would just sit there and listen sometimes. How many languages can I hear on the bus? And getting to 5 was like no problem.
Right. I think Israel is actually, there's one country that's like Israel. That's Epcot Center. That's basically it. Think about it. There's a lot of similarities to Epcot Center in Israel. Okay.
There's no controversy of putting Israel into Epcot Center, whatever. Let's not go there.
Oh, yeah. I'm not worried about that because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Just like mini Israel doesn't make sense in Israel. I never understood that. Like, why would you want to have mini Israel? Israel's already plenty mini. Okay. And what do you need that for?
Well, because it was in order to get away from greater Israel.
Now, if you would have put in a mini golf into mini Israel, then I would get it. If you
I assumed originally that that's what it was.
Okay, now that's cool. I would mini golf Israel for sure.
Would you tee off from the Temple Mount? I don't think so.
And if anybody else agrees with, that's right. You put it right on top of the golden. If anybody else thinks that there should be a mini golf of Israel, contact me. Speaking of contacting me, Robert says, Shalom from Cape Town. Shalom to you, Robert. I've never been down there at Cape Town and Joburg. I haven't been down there. Would love to get down one time. So if you want to invite me down there, that'll be fun. And our mutual friend Yoel Karen writes, back to the discussion that we had earlier, he says, our security needs evolve. Example, a demilitarized Sinai Peninsula is no longer in our interest. These islands are no longer critical to our security and commercial interests. But if they become an issue in the future, I'd rather be making a call to Riyadh than to Cairo. That I don't disagree with you. In fact, I'm quite excited. A lot of people give me a hard time because I'm a little bit more of a fan of Mohammed bin Salman. And people give me a hard time because...
You like people who are willing to exercise power ruthlessly. Facebook. You just do. It's okay, Yishai. It's okay. You can like those kind of people.
You know what? I'll comment directly on what you said. The answer to that is like, if you don't understand what a Saudi Arabian ruler has to do, then you don't understand Saudi Arabia, and you don't understand what they're actually doing every day over there. So then, you're talking to me like as though you're talking in Vermont or something. It's like Saudi Arabia is not Vermont, okay? And Khashoggi.
Really,
and all
you're
that
never
stuff.
gonna get maple syrup out of that place,
right?
Anyway,
quite. Anyway, and I'm excited. He's actually building a brand new city on the Red Sea called Neom.
Yeah, that's what it's called.
$250 billion initial investment in the city. It's actually exciting. In any case, let's keep going. So the bones of Joseph are taken with him. This is an important thing. The bones of Joseph are like a second, or at this point, a first Ark of the Covenant. Mm-hmm. They are a holy ark.
You know what I think was with bones. Them? I've said it many times, I'm sure, on the show, is I have this image that all the notes that made up Sefer Bereshit were in there. Like everything Kodesh Baruch Hu told Moshe to write down as the Sipori Avot. Who had all? Who do you think was writing down the stories of Mama? And I mean, of course, Hashem could have dictated everything to Moshe. And I want to get into the whole textual question, right? And that's not my point. My point is I like the picture. Like, what was bones of Joseph weren't just a God forbid, a bag of dust. This was a real Yerusha. And so, like, either literally the Cliff's Notes of Sefer Bereshit or just metaphorically in the sense that he was that connector. I think that's a precious legacy that Moshe was not going to leave behind.
Let's do a meditative moment where let's think for a second. What is the Yosef's bones that we take with us in our life? What is the things? Remember that famous short story, "The Things They Carried"? Remember that one about Vietnam? It's like what is the stuff that you carry with you? It could be physical, it could be a memory, but that's like your Joseph bones. That's like my job is to take this past, take the forefathers, and then at the same time bring them home. Like I've got to park this train in its depot. I got to bring this thing to its conclusion. If you remember the movie The Terminal with Tom Hanks, where he's just trying to get that signature of the last jazz musician so that his passed away father could fulfill that wish. And he carries this jar of these signatures of these jazz musicians. It's like, what's the thing that you carry with you that's from your forefathers and mothers? What's that thing that you carry that you want to bring it to the very end? What's that personal life mission that you have that gives you strength throughout, that you look at this thing and you're like, oh, I do know what I'm doing, what I'm here to do?
That's a fantastic question. That's a fantastic question.
Just, they walked for 40 years with these bones, and they knew, like, I got to bring these bones to the place. And just to remind us, at the very end, it is Joshua, the son of Ephraim, who is going to be basically Joseph's grandson or great-grandson. Great-grandson, because he's the son of Nun, the son of Ephraim. That is going to be, his grandson is going to be the one that brings his bones back to the land of Israel. If Joseph was in charge of kicking the Jews, helping the Jews, causing the Jews to leave the land of Israel, it's his great-grandson which is going to bring the Jewish people back home. Okay.
I'm just reflecting on that. Yeah, I don't. It deserves real thought.
Yefeh. Let's go on.
Take me to the sea.
Yeah, let's go to the sea, and what's going to carry us to the sea. Joseph's bones are with us, but we need a physical thing to light our way and to lead the way, and that is this pillar of smoke and fire. Pillar of smoke and fire. A cloud by day, fire by night, right?
Yeah, I love the symbolism of it. I always love the image and how the Torah is careful to say that, that they were never bereft, that they would literally, like, you could picture, like, as night began to fall, the fire would, like, come up from beneath the smoke and replace it, and then as the light would rise, the smoke would come down. There was always a guide, and having spent a fair bit of time walking in places where, if you didn't have a map, which of course they didn't, you wouldn't have any idea of where you were going.
Right.
This power of having a light on the horizon, I think, is a very important image that is meant to be definitive from here on out. Because you could say, really, it's all downhill from here, so to speak, in terms of God's guiding hand, meaning there's a pinnacle through the Red Sea. It's like, go this way. Like, you can't miss it. You're not going to the right. You're not going to the left. There's a wall of water. The path is clear, right? So you're following this pillar of smoke through the walls of water. From there on out, though, in Jewish history, it gets harder and harder to see, right? And where that light on the horizon is and which way we're meant to be going becomes less and less certain. And so on some level, doubling down every year on internalizing this story and knowing that it's actually always there. It takes us to Sinai. Once it takes us to Sinai, and we receive the Torah, and then we continue that path to Eretz Yisrael, basically, you always have the tools then to sort of backsight, as it were. It's like you talk about navigation in terms of, like, if you can't see exactly which way forward you're supposed to go, I can know where I am right now and look back to where I came from, and that gives me a line. And so that the image of the constant guide has always been very powerful for me as someone who's spent a lot of time wandering, frankly.
Well, one of the things that we're told to do, one of the mitzvot, is that when we pray 3 times a day, we're supposed to pray towards Jerusalem. That is where that pillar of smoke and fire lives. That's where the smoke of the sacrifices and the light of the menorah is coming from the heart of Jerusalem. And today, as that Jerusalem is reopened, reborn, re-embodied, re-enlivened, we got to turn our face to there, and we could see it. It's very clear, and that is our guiding principle today. Back to Yerushalayim, back to that center, back to that light, back to that smoke, and we're not lost like we have been to some extent for the last 2,000 years. Of course, we've been guided throughout those years as well. But now we're like, it's in the clear. It's right. It's straight ahead.
Actually, I'm gonna disagree with you, because I think actually for 2,000 years, facing Jerusalem to pray was our guide. The challenges were actually here now. And so I'm thinking about the Breita that you may know from Gemara and Brachot about how, if you're outside the land of Israel, you face the land of Israel, pray. If you're inside the land of Israel, you face Jerusalem. If you're in Jerusalem, you face the Temple Mount. If you're on the Temple Mount, you face the Holy of Holies. Then it says, if you're in the Holy of Holies, which way do you face? Which is a strange question in and of itself. Right? Because there's only one person in there one time a year, although he does pray. It says you're supposed to face that place, that space between the Kruvim. Right? And elsewhere it says you're supposed to be mechaven leiv l'shamayim, right? You should orient your heart to your Father in heaven. That's a much more delicate act. But how is it that we face the space between us and God? How is it that we really oriented ourselves to God? And I worry sometimes that we're in danger of stopping short at facing Jerusalem and not appreciating the task which is in our hands. Because so long as the Shekhinah is not in Yerushalayim, we're only on a path toward that proper orientation. And just it's not really disagreeing with you. I'm just sounding a mild warning note.
That's great. That's great. We have another thing that helps us navigate sometimes, as the line from the Hunt for Red October hounds to the hunters, in that sometimes we see a light ahead of us, but other times we see the black boot of Pharaoh or the Nazis, etc., on our tail. And that's what happened here also, that on the one hand, they're going towards freedom and towards the Torah and towards the land of Israel. On the other hand, look behind you, there's a genocidal army hot on your tail. And one of the reasons that Pharaoh reminds me of the UN is that
I just love it as one of the reasons. There's many, in fact.
That's right. Well, it says here, look what it says. It's in chapter 14, verse 5, verse hey. It says, he was told that the people ran away. I mean, like, duh, right? And then
let them go.
Yeah. And then it says, "V'yafach levav paro v'avadav el ha'am." And then they're like, "Wait a minute, what do we do? How can we let them go? What about all those plagues? No worries. How can we have let them go? Mazot asinu, what have we done? Ki shilachnu et Yisrael mi'avdeinu. What have we done to release them from under our slavery?" And this is like the UN in the sense that like the UN like voted whatever. I'm not don't ever misunderstand that I think that in any way the UN gave birth to Israel. Like, disabuse yourself of that notion. But for those people who think that way, it's like they recognize they recognize partition, but in any case, Jewish rights in the land of Israel. And then they spend the rest of the time chasing after us to destroy us. So it's like, wait a minute, Yeah, you can't do that. Right. So it's like, and Zionism is racism? What do you mean? Like yesterday you said that you're cool with Zionism. So what happened there? So that's like a Pharaoh type moment. And,
I can't wait to get to that episode. I got so much bubbling on that.
Oh, I'm excited about that. You're talking about the Jewish story, of course.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, we got time to get there.
Okay, so and Pharaoh gives chase. It says it has the word a few different times.
He's in hot pursuit. There's no question.
He's in hot pursuit, and it's going to be a violent confrontation when they come face to face. If they indeed come to a kinetic point.
And this is a worthwhile place, by the way, to raise that always problematic issue that this is the last time it says "V'yichazek Hashem et leiv Paro melech Mitzrayim yivdol fachay bnei Yisrael," and God made sure He strengthened His heart in order to make sure that He chased Am Yisrael. And I really took to heart your shot, which you couldn't remember, which your friend said it, that we spoke about last week, in the sense that God had to harden His heart. Or maybe it was the Sforno you said it was.
Yeah, it was Rabbi Ari Abramowitz quoting the Sforno. And then my good friend Ari Silverman sent me more on that. So
so I think that it's a beautiful shot. Nonetheless, here I feel like we almost are called. There's something else called for, which is I think a recognition that there comes a point of no return, and the Rambam gets into this. There comes a point of no return. To think that a person always has free will and can always simply stop and say, you know what, that's a bad idea, is to fail to appreciate that our actions have consequences which extend beyond the immediate. And that for Paro to reverse course right now would actually not be justice. To Paro even have the choice to reverse course right now would. Or the other way to read it is, and when it says, "V'yichazek Hashem et leiv Paro," it just means this is the way God made the world. Like God made the world in a way that if Paro's gone this far, there's only one destination, and that's the bottom of the sea.
Right, but before the bottom of the sea, you're right. But let's just take one step beforehand, and remember that you're at the edge of the sea. The Jewish people are at the edge of the sea, and things look kind of bleak. We're in a tight spot.
It's a classic rock hard place, hammer anvil,
or a wet place, right? Right between Pharaoh's arrows and his fighters. And his chariots coming down, and his blades coming down on you, and behind you is the very, very deep Red Sea. Right, the Reed Sea. It is. If you've ever swam the Reed Sea, if you swim it just a little bit off the shore, it's like a kilometer drop off, and it is just scary. They actually, in Prince of Egypt, they do it fairly, that they show what a big drop off people had to kind of climb down in order to get to the bottom of the sea. And we're really in a this is the genocidal situation. This is the Jewish people getting shot in the back of the head type of moment, where like you can't, you're just totally stuck, and you don't know what to do. And at this darkest moment of the Jewish experience, in this moment where they're coming out of slavery that has broken them, with a little bit of a ray of hope, but then the truth comes, the power comes back to quash the truth. Here it is, and at that very moment, a small little light comes out, and it's called Jewish humor. right? We talk about this every year.
Yeah,
we can't
I
stop.
actually quoted you on this the other day. Somebody loved it. I forget where I said it to.
It's like at this bottom of the moment. This is like near death experience. They just say to him, "Hey Moses, what? There weren't any graves in Egypt, though. We could have just died there. You need to
walk for 3 days to die.
Thanks a lot. There's plenty of graves in Egypt, let me tell you. All right, and that's exactly what the Torah says. Verse 11. Vayomru el Moshe. They said to Moses, "Hami bli en kvarim b'Mitzrayim." Are there no graves in Egypt? And the biting irony, humor, cynicism. Irony is the right word here. The biting irony is just, to me, it is. On the one hand, you could be annoyed by it, right? That's like the straight way to read it, is to be annoyed by it. But if you just kind of took a little glimmer in your eye, put a little smile on your face, you can read it as like, this is like dark Jewish humor. You know what I mean? What? There were no graves in Egypt. You couldn't just keep us there.
Left us all the way out here just to die.
Right. Oh, you take us out here to die, right in the desert. So what have you done to us? To take us out of Egypt. And he keeps going, like, didn't we tell you, leave us alone? I told you to leave me alone. I don't want to go. I didn't want to go. Okay? It's like Billy Crystal. It's like Billy Crystal par excellence. It's mamash Billy Crystal. Ki tov lanu avodat Mitzrayim. It would have been better to serve them. Egypt. Mimutenu b'midbar. And then
Taste the soup. Taste the soup.
Exactly. Ooh, look how much you know. Huh? Right? And Moshe answers, Vayomer Moshe Am, Al tira'u, don't be afraid. Hityatzvu. Stand straight, stand up straight. Or another way of saying it is man up. Re'u et Yeshuat Hashem. Now see the salvation. What's that?
Get a grip.
Get a grip, that's right. Re'u et Yeshuat Hashem. See the salvation of the Lord. I'm feeling Charlton Heston-y. Asher yaseh lechem hayom, that he's going to do the salvation of the Lord, which he will do for thee today. Ki asher ra'item et Mitzrayim hayom, as you see Egypt today, lo tosifon lirotam od ad olam. You'll never see, they'll never again appear in this way. You're going to see something that has never been seen. And then the famous line, Hashem yilachem lechem, God will fight for you. Vatem tacharishun, and you will be silent, you will be quiet. Zip it, okay? Because right,
I think you get to the pathos of that moment, so you feel Moshe like, ooh, 40 years in the wilderness is not going to end well. If his last line was, and zip it.
That's right, and zip it, okay? I'm going to fight for you.
I mean, listen, joking aside, there's something very important to me in here. I'm sorry I cut you off, though.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
There's a very important intersection between Yirah and Yireh that we know well. Right, in seeing and fearing. Like you look at the line that you just read, is that the people. It literally says that they lift up their eyes and they saw Egypt chasing them. And it says, "V'yomer Moshe al tira'u." Don't be afraid. Tira'u. Hitasuv u'ru'u. Stand here and see. Mm-hmm. Wait, it's like almost the same word, right? If you hear it in the Hebrew, right? What God's going to do. Ki asher ra'item et Mitzrayim hayom, and when you're going to see Mitzrayim today, you'll never see them like this again. And then pretty soon, what we're going to have is V'yoram et Hashem u'Moshe avdo, right? God feared. They saw the Egyptians dead, and they feared Moshe and God. Now, this relationship between seeing and fear, or standing in awe, as it were, could be both, really, is an old relationship in our story. It began back in the Garden of Eden. The first appearance of Yira is when Adam hides because their eyes are opened up by eating from the tree, and they see that they're naked. And then we have, of course, Avraham Avinu, the whole interplay between Yira and the binding of Isaac. Right, that he ends up saying that the mountain is called Hashem Yireh, right? That it's where God will see and will be seen, and yet it's all about the fear of God, right? But here we have a national experience of this powerful intersection between, we say seeing is believing in English. Well, seeing is believing. It goes back to your point about truth, right? And one of the challenges that social media presents to the internalized standards we have of truth, no matter how skeptical, cynical, and world-wise we are, most people who see something happening in a video, so what's that video? And it's like, it's real, right? But this is much deeper than that, because it's what you see, how your experience shapes your frame of reference going forward. What you even consider to look at And what Moshe is saying to them is that, you need to take a look again. Because the way you see Egypt now, in your scared self, that you think they're all powerful and chasing you, you'll never see them that way anymore. Which is why the Mechilta actually sees this as one of the sources for the mitzvah never to go back to Egypt. Which is a very interesting source. Why? And Moshe says, he reads it as Kasher Rayitem et Mitzrayim Hayom. You see, just like you see Egypt today, Lo Tzifu Rotam Od Olam. It's not a comment, you'll never see them again. It's a command. Don't ever look at them that way again. Never look to them for power. Never go to them for horses. Don't go back to Egypt. Right? Why? Because I'm about to show you how false their power really is. And you'll learn to fear me. This is one of the most important moments in human history, I would go as far as today, certainly in our history. Which is that's why, by the way, all our liberal progressive brothers and sisters are wearing those T-shirts that say "Standing Up to Tyrants" since Paro. Now, whether you think that former President Trump belongs in that category of tyrants or not is not something I want to get into right now. My point is
sometimes we replace tyrants with worse tyrants,
or at least more subtle ones. The point is that there's something deep within the identity of what it is to be a Jew to understand that there's really only one thing you're supposed to fear. And that causes you to see the world in a different way. That's my point. And this is the moment where they went from seeing to fearing as opposed from fearing to seeing. You understand?
Right.
They saw. It was the whole logical mind. Like I said, dude, Moshe, ocean, Egyptians, we really had to walk all the way out here to die? We could have just died back then. Moshe says, you don't see. You're about to see something which will change the way you look at the world forever.
Right.
And that's awesome.
And we had, I think, that moment in the 6 Day War. I think I think probably the 6 Day War, which is this moment of despair that like something was like, now watch this.
Yes.
Now watch this. And that's what happened. It went exactly the opposite way. I personally believe that the 6 Day War is the greatest revelation since the splitting of the Red Sea. And it's on that level.
And we could go awfully far with that, just pointing out that the challenge is, of course, then how one sees the world in light of it. And as we've spoken about many times, the 6 Day War versus 1973. And how do you actually put the two together into a coherent story? And therefore, what world do you see when you look out?
Right.
And it's very divided amongst Am Yisrael in terms
That's
of
right.
how
That's right. The Yom Kippur War is the war of the left. You have to be a realist. You live in a world. You're not the superpower of the skies.
Notice it's welded to a need then to reinterpret 67.
Right, as in hubris,
conquest, and intoxicating pride.
Right.
They work together.
Right,
yeah.
and the other read is no. God revealed Himself. We won our land back, and the Yom Kippur War was, instead of recognizing God back then when He gave us this thing, we did have hubris, but that was the secular impulse. Right, and this was the retort to that, and still God let us win. Let's not make that mistake again. Right. Anyway, speaking of history, I think also that we have here what I understand is one of the first examples of representative democracy. What do I mean? We have in verse...
They stood around and argued and did nothing, and somebody strong just led the way?
Maybe. Check this out. Here's my explanation of representative democracy. Verse 14, we said, God said that Moses told the Jewish people, be quiet, God is going to fight for you, and you have to be silent. The next verse is, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, ma titzak elai, why are you screaming to me? Deber bnei Yisrael v'Yisrael, let the Jewish people, talk to the Jewish people, let them go. But what do I see happening here? He told the Jewish people, silence! And then he took their scream and their concern and brought it up to God. And God's like, you see what I'm saying? He took the agency from them. He's like, you guys be quiet. Let me do the talking. He talks to God and he's, hey, what's going on here? We're going to die. And then God says to him,
what are you shouting at me for?
Yeah, what are you shouting for? Get moving. Get moving. Don't you know that this is the moment? Yeah. Don't you know that this is the moment to go? And Rabbi Tendler, I say this every year, my Rebbe in the United States, my brother's Rebbe as well, Rabbi Moshe David Tendler, God bless him, for continued health. He's in his 90s.
Amen.
He told us about this verse. He said, what does this mean? What does it mean? Why do you cry to me? Tell the Jewish people to go. What does that mean? This is a tough moment, so it's time to pray. And Rabbi Tendler says that God said to him, Moses, don't you know that you have the most powerful force in the world at your disposal, which is the unity of the Jewish people? You have the Jewish people together. All you have to do is march. and it's just going to split the sea or anything else in its path. And on a deeper level, I also want to add, just to touch it for a second, but an important point of Jewish unity. There's a medrash that says, we all know the medrash that Nachshon ben Aminadav, he jumped into the water, and he's from the tribe of Judah. There's another medrash that says that nothing would split the sea until the bones of Joseph were brought forward. Mm-hmm. And if you take those two midrashim together, you realize that actually what this represents is the two kingdoms of Israel. The Messiah that comes from the Davidic line and the Messiah that comes from the Joseph line. And Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David, when they lock in together into cooperation, nothing can stop them. Nothing can stop this force. This same force was the thing that really entered the land of Israel with the 12 spies. The other spies became weak, but two spies, one from the house of Joseph, which is Joshua from the tribe of Ephraim, and one was Kalev ben Yefuneh. When these two forces, the Davidic force and the Joseph force, come together, they're just able to barrel through all the things, all the fears, and all of the impossible situations that they can open it up. So the depth of Jewish unity, not just everybody being like, I like you, but rather these two kingdoms, these two forces amongst the Jewish people come together. Just by parentheses between me and you, Rav Mike, I've been reading again the book of Samuel 2, or 2 Samuel. One of the main themes in the whole book of Samuel 1 and 2 is how can we bring the force of Saul and the force of David together? Is it through a wife? Is it through a best friend? Is it through an army general? Like, what can I get? How can we come together, for God's sakes? And that's the great challenge.
I mean, unfortunately, one could draw the conclusion from Shmuel that the answer is you can't. That at least at this stage of history, the two are sequential and not synchronous.
Right.
And that the vision that Yechezkel offers, to keep going with the sort of full extension of the holding together the rods of Judah and the rods of Yosef, and a reunification on, for lack of a better term, a structural level, a reintegration, is really an end game process, and I really see that. You look at what's happening in our streets today between, let's say, the Yehudim and the Israelim, right? Without necessarily throwing labels around, but there's a tension between Yehudim and Israelim in our society, which is expressive of real rifts and differences and substantive, not just cultural ones. And it's my fervent hope that we can put those pieces together into a redemptive force.
Amen. I personally, just on the side of Jews or Israelis, Yehudim or Israelim, I personally, in terms of the lingo there, I've never agreed with that public discourse lingo, and I've always preferred the Rabbi Nachman approach, which is the Jewish person is called an Ish Israeli. Like, that is the highest level of a Jewish person, or Ish or Israeli.
Fine, but you understand what I mean in the common usage.
All right, very good. We'll have to discuss that at a later time, because we're starting to go over an hour here, and we have to get through just a few more things, really two more things.
We've got to get through the sea.
Yeah, we got to get through the sea. That's right, we got to get through the sea. And indeed, the Jewish people go through the sea, and v'hamayim lahem chomam yiminam u'mismolam, the walls, the water is for them as walls from the right and from the left. In other places, it's explained like a frozen wall. And still, between these walls, the Amud Esh and Anan, the pillar of smoke and fire, maybe they've become kind of unified as a pillar of smoke and fire, are guiding the Jewish people through it. Moses will release the waters back onto the Egyptians who are giving chase, and that's right. And it's like it's a big flush. That's what happened there. You know what I mean? It's a royal flush. Maybe I should call it that. You think you like that royal flush? You like that because of the the royal flush. And
I was going to actually ignore it, to be honest.
You're probably right too. In any case, and then we have the famous Song of the Sea. Because when you come out of this kind of experience, it's hard to say. You either use an onomatopoeia like "wow," or you go like Bill and Ted's. You go, "Dude," or you are a little bit more intelligent than that, articulate, and you give Moses's Az Yashir. And I want to just use one commentary that our mutual friend Zev sent to me from Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. It says in the Song of the Sea, it says, I will glorify him. I will dedicate myself to being a place and a home for him, God. My entire existence in life is a temple for God's glorification and exaltation. My whole purpose is to act as a conduit for revelation of divine presence in this world. And then the next line, my Father is God, I will exalt him. God has maintained the covenant established with the ancestors. This good faith is what characterized God for my fathers, and this is how how they described him to me. However, I will praise him even higher to publicize awareness of God and his authority throughout the world. This, then, is the mission thrust upon each subsequent generation of Israel, to carry the message of God's existence, to extol him to the nations, and to elevate step by step the Creator's standing amongst mankind.
I mean, it's a commentary on this line, Ze Levi Anvehu, Elohei Aviv Romamenu, right? This is my God, the Anvehu. It's so powerful because we read it as Rav Hirsch said, alternatively as praise, but the Anvehu, I will give him place. Right? As in Lashon Vei, right? And there's a tremendous power that song represents in the biblical narrative for sure, and certainly in the rabbinic mind, that song is the right response to the miraculous. So much so, it's not just right response, it's a necessary response. The Midrash says that God wanted to make Hezekiah the Messiah and Sennacherib's army Gog and Magog, the last battle, but Hezekiah didn't sing a praise after he was saved. Right, and this is the archetype, that there's some element of the redemptive which doesn't happen in this moment if Moshe and Bnei Israel don't sing this song. There's something lacking in the redemption, and so there's a wholeness. Well, this is when I'm focused. One of my favorite moments of the morning davening is that the Mishnah Berurah brings the Zohar, which when he brings the Zohar, you should be paying attention, right? It's not a systematic approach. That says that anyone who says the Song of the Sea in the morning and feels the joy of having been saved in Mitzrayim, all their sins are forgiven. Mochlin lo kol avonotav.
Wow!
Right, which is a crazy and fantastic statement. Why on earth would saying the Song of the Sea with a sense of joy? What does that have to do with my sins? And it's such a powerful invitation to recognize the essential nature of consciousness, that if you can touch that place of real joy, that salvation is real. I know it's real because I was there. And out of the space of sin and narrowness, and it just really puts you back in touch with the reality of God.
Beautiful. I will now translate what you're saying into homework for all of our listeners. We invite you to say the Song of the Sea one time this week, and then send me a hashtag, I said the Song of the Sea. I said the Song of the Sea. Hashtag I said the Song of the Sea. Send it to Yishai, YishaiFleisher.com or Yishai@thelandofisrael.com.
And I'm going to give you the advanced homework. Wait. And if you say it anyway, every morning, push yourself to try and feel the joy, just a little bit of it, of what it was actually like to be saved.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if you don't read the Hebrew printed out in English, I'm inviting Jews and Gentiles to do this, just to get out there and say the Song of the Sea with gusto. All right, it's Gusto Week.
It is definitely. This is big. This is the big time.
That's right. Two more topics that we have to touch, and there's so much more to say about the Song of the Sea. So much more to say, especially that it really ends with the end of the Song of the Sea is really the call to rebuild. That was an anachronism.
Not that point.
It's not. It's the Song of the Sea ends with both. We remember that the women sang the Song of the Sea. There was a women's minyan, a women's choir, a women's
ladies, give it up.
Yeah, that's right. And then they're like, oh, look what we got right here. We got the tambourines.
Because they were the ones that actually believed they were going to be saved.
Right. They take out the tambourines.
The men were thinking I should have brought more food. The women were like, get the tambourines.
Yeah, that's right. Lady, we could have put more gold there. She said, I need the tambourine, and I'm not leaving Egypt without it. And
or the timbrels, or however you want to call them.
It's my industrial-sized tambourine, and I can't live without it. Okay, where's that from? In any case, there was somebody will write to me what that's from.
Yeah, don't tell me.
I'll tell you after the show. Let's just say the original had the word hairdryer instead of tambourine, okay? It's my industrial-sized tambourine. Okay, the next thing, we have just two more topics to talk about. I want to talk about one quickly and one a little bit more in depth. So we got to focus here, and that is the manna. The manna. This is the big Torah portion of the manna bread, the man that comes from heaven, the heavenly food. That's this Torah portion. What's that?
Heavenly eats.
Heavenly eats. Yeah, heavenly eats. Which is like, on the one hand, the Jewish people are reduced to a prenatal, not prenatal. What do you call it? In utero. We're moving into in utero. You know.
Ooh.
Yeah, we're moving into its exodus. You're a nation, but we're also like babies, in the sense that God is like feeding us like through what's it called?
Connection.
Yeah,
Through
there's an umbilical cord. There's an umbilical cord, and it's a direct feeding. You're not going to work for your food. It's back to the Garden of Eden. It's back to being fed. It's being grown as a nation. It's
surrounded by the clouds of glory and protected on all sides. Yeah,
right. And you're in the desert. Right. So on the one hand, the manna bread is this amazing thing, and when we taste it in real life, like as I said last week, that last week fell a hail here in Judea, and we picked it up in our house, and we had everybody eat it, and you could really taste the manna. You really could taste it, and Rabbi Nachman talks about like just plain bread and water being something that you could taste anything in if you just kind of concentrate on manna type feelings. But at the same time, it's also a as you would call it, a lack of agency. It's like you're no longer the person who produces it. You kind of get it right now until you get to the land of Israel. When you get to the land of Israel, manna will be coming from sweat and toil of the earth, and that will raise up manna in a way of regular nature or perceived regular nature. But this is different. So. But on the other hand, our rabbis and all the kind of mystics types say, if you want like welfare, read the lines about the manna bread. Read that out loud every day, and there's a blessing for godly sustenance through it.
Yeah, it always strikes me that later in the book of Devarim, in Deuteronomy, when Moshe is kind of retelling all these episodes, it describes the manna that its purpose was inui. It was la'anotchem, right? To test or even to bring you a little bit of suffering in the sense of dependency. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's a very important lesson of life, which our whole modern selves have struggled against, right? That side of agency and autonomy and capability. And we haven't spoken about the COVID crisis in some time, so just to bring us back into that context, that one, I think the most difficult elements of COVID has been the sense that all the systems that gave us a sense of security and that there's a long term that can be relied upon were shown to be, if not completely illusory, then at the very least not as reliable as we had hoped. And that element of uncertainty and tlut, right? Tlut, dependency is not even quite strong enough. Just like a contingency of existence. That our existence is contingent, not definitive. That, I think, is what the manna was supposed to introduce us to. And just as an aside, the Maharalmi Prague says that is actually the definition of Yirat Shamayim, to understand that your existence is contingent, and on some level, it's the purpose for which humanity was created. Because we can be conscious of our contingent nature. That's why we can choose Kol B'dei Shamayim Chutz Miyirat Shamayim. That everything's in the hands of heaven, except choosing to fear God, choosing to hold that sense that, I don't define the world. And the man was there to train us to that. So its sweetness is obvious because God does. But its bitterness or the fear that goes with it of knowing you have today but not necessarily for tomorrow is very real.
Speaking of manna, I got to show you something that came down in front of our door, but it'll take me 10 seconds to get it, so you're going to have to fill air for a second, Rav Mike.
I'm filling air for a second. That was a little bit of an unexpected invitation, but it's always a pleasure. And maybe I should talk about Yishai when he's not here. Oh, too late.
Okay.
You'll never know what I said, will you?
I don't know. I'll have to watch the
Go back and
rerun.
listen to the recording.
Okay. This is what came in our front door. It says
no.
it's chocolate. Okay, it's chocolate, and it says "Ihye beseger," which is a play.
Who? Where?
Our town sent this to us in front of our door. He put it out.
You live in a much cooler town than I do.
And when it comes to this stuff, it's a very cool town, and it says "Ihye beseger," which is like a play on the Hebrew word "Ihye beseder," which is everything is going to be okay. But the Daled is kind of replacing the Gimel, and the Gimel is replacing the Daled, and it's "Ihye beseger." It'll be okay in the quarantine, in the closure period, lockdown. So here's a chocolate. And inside it's the
seem to be going anywhere right now.
Yeah, we are locked down. Not only that, but our skies are closed. Our skies are closed.
Yeah, they shut the gates again, huh?
They shut, but no, not like before. This is really shut. You can't even fly in. That's it. You're done. Right. It's like Israel is closed for business, for the outsiders. By the way, speaking of manna, I just want to remember our good friend Chaim, who makes awesome pickles called Prohibition Pickle. Okay,
yeah, we're hoping he's going to make it out to Mali to me this week. Chaim, if you're listening, make it happen, man.
That's right. And
hey,
let's say
if you're listening and you want to help make it happen, you can send gifts of pickles, herring, happen to love, also smoked whitefish. Think about it. You could help a small businessman here in the land of Israel and make my Shabbos.
That's right. By just tricking out your kiddush and going to Prohibition Pickle on Facebook or on Instagram and ordering something for yourself if you're in the land of Israel, or for somebody you love in the land of Israel, from your rabbi, your rebbitzin, your uncle, your aunt, your sister, your brother, your kids, or of course your favorite show host. So check out Prohibition Pickle. They make our Shabbos awesome. So
amen.
And I'm totally out of the hot sauce. I'm totally out. So I needed very bad.
I went through that so quickly. Did you try the grill mix? The grill mix is fantastic.
I have not tried the grill mix, nor have I had the Gehenim. I haven't had the super hot stuff, so I want the hot stuff.
Okay. Super hot, So.
Prohibition Pickle, friends. Prohibition Pickle, check it out. That's the manna for the week. Let's get to the last topic, Rav Mike.
All right, I got to wrap it up. Do it.
You got to wrap it up. And
anybody who's still listening right now deserves a reward.
That's right. And we just have really one more topic to talk about, and that's the topic of, if I can ask my delightful daughter to open some of that window, that would be wonderful. The last topic is the topic of Amalek.
Coming. Knew it was.
Yeah.
Right there at the end.
When things are too good, comes in Amalek, and he loves to spoil it. He loves to cool it off. He loves to cool off the excitement and the energy of the Jewish people. And he is, he's the revelation buster. He's the good energy buster. Sometimes, like some of the Arab Knesset members, whenever there's like a Zionistic fervor building up in the Knesset, they jump up and start to yell and call Israel a racist state, all kinds of stuff like that. They're just the needle in the balloon is the Amalek energy.
They are definitely the ultimate burster of bubbles.
Yes, but they're professionals at that. They're burster of bubbles, because that is what Amalek does. The Amalek thing is to fight in a dark moment, in a moment of light, to bring darkness in a moment of light. It's a kind of, I would call it a kind of like a zelu madze bar elokim, like it's the antithesis energy. I call it it's like the bizarro energy, Well,
that's why later Bilam will call them Reshit Goyim. Amalek Reshit Goyim, that they're the first amongst nations, sort of an appellation which also applies to Israel, in the sense that they represent an alternative universe. They represent an alternative path. But I think it's so important in light of what you're saying, that this bubble bursting, downer, evil guys, right, exists right here between crossing the Red Sea and standing at Sinai. Mm-hmm. And for many, many reasons. But I think the most practical we can take from it is, in the end of the day, it didn't matter. We still left Egypt, and we still stood at Sinai.
Right.
Meaning, it's important to remember that if someone stains your revelation, or rains on your parade, or I don't know, like harshes your mellow, or however you want to put it, that it doesn't fundamentally uproot the truth which was carrying you out of Egypt.
Right.
And which you're going to hear at Sinai. Don't make that mistake, because sometimes we give Amalek more power than they deserve.
Right. That's a great point. That's a great point. Don't let people don't let things, and especially if you're filling out your paperwork for Aliyah, like, don't be surprised. The Amalek energy wants to stop you. It wants to stop that process from moving forward. You will
your
face
first year, when you discover how hard it is to actually live here. Don't be surprised either. You came for good reasons, and you have a bright future.
Right.
It may be a process.
Right. That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I just want to focus on one thing this year. I just want to focus on the last two words in the Torah portion, midor dor. That it says vayomer. It is said, either Moses said or God said, or it is said, ki yad al kes yad. There's a hand upon the throat of God. Is it that God's hand is raised in an oath, or is there some force trying to, as it were, knock God off its throne? It's a totally different read of this verse, but it doesn't matter. Both are. You
can pull them both off.
You can pull them both off. Well, one is trying to pull God off, and one is God saying, "I have an eternal kind of war with milchama leHashem." There's a war onto God with Amalek from generation to generation. Here's an interesting thought, Rav Mike. This term midor dor is only found in one other place, which was a few Torah portions ago, when God says about himself that what he says. Here's midor dor, and therefore the other one is ledor dor, which is this one says from generation to generation, but there it says that my name, God, which is the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, is my name for eternity, and my Zichri, and this is my memory.
Translation there,
right?
Okay, memory.
This is how I'm to be remembered or said. From generation to generation. To me, it's obvious that there's a tension between the Amalek energy, which that some people explain that Amalek comes from the word melika, that they want to cut the head off the body and detach you from that consciousness and that mind of the forefathers and mothers. The antithesis is a connection to the forefathers and mothers. That's the antithesis to the Amalekite strength in this world, and the antithesis to the connection to the forefathers and mothers is the force of Amalek that wants to detach you.
So I want to add something that's a beautiful tension you're bringing out, is that there's kind of two ways to relate to an intergenerational process. One can see it as a failure. I mean, listen, if this was a truth, then it should have just happened. Why is this taking so long? Why is it so difficult? Even if I'm failing forward, which is a precious phrase in my eyes, nonetheless, it's still failure. Right, so that's where Amalek begins to erode one's ability to really succeed in the motivation. The other way to look at it is that the generational process is a value unto itself. That failure is not an accident, and it's not even really a failure. It's a critical element of growth. Now, you know what lies between the two of them? Because it's true, midor dor only exists twice, but it's reminiscent to the ear of kotz v'dardar. Right, that right after Adam eats from the tree of knowledge, God says to him, "You blew it, man. Right, that you're gonna have to eat by the sweat of your brow, and you're gonna work the earth, and it's gonna be motzi kotz v'dalda. It's gonna bring out thorns and thistles." What's the connection? So my Rebbe, Rav Daniel Cohen, the Rabbi Yishai Bat Ayin, always used to teach us about Amalek. Is that kotz v'dalda, Adam was cursed with a sense of dissipation. That much of the energy he was going to put into the things he needed was going to go nowhere. It was going to sprout into thistles, and 5% he'd get what he needed, as opposed to in Eden, whereas the shtaim alu l'mitash shlosha yaldu, right? The processes produce their product without effort. Now, here's the thing: this is the story of Am Yisrael and human history. The processes get you down with a sense of dissipation. Is the thing that prevents you from doing the things you want to do is a knowledge that a lot of the energy you expend won't actually go where you want it to go? If that's the case, I'm like, sorry, gotcha. But if you understand that there's no such thing as uselessly spent energy, that the effort is its own value, even if it dissipates off, right? But that discipline, the focus, the clarification of the value and importance, etc., that itself is a merit. You transform Amalek into a tool for redemption itself. Mm-hmm. Right? And so this piece you're pointing out here is incredibly important in my eyes.
Well, it's an amazing Torah portion that takes us through the fear of being annihilated, to the glory of the splitting of the Red Sea, the Reed Sea, to the Song of the Sea, which, as you explained, Rav Mike Feuer, is really part of the redemptive process itself, or else it's not a full redemption if we don't sing that song. We went from that to manna. which has also both sides. On the one hand, a redemptive, getting it straight from God, but on the other hand, there's a test in that. And we went from that to the dual nature of Amalek, which on the one hand is a hindrance, a balloon popping needle, a force of darkness in this world, a bizarro anti-Israel force.
Spiritual buzzkill.
Spiritual buzzkill. I like that a lot. Spiritual buzzkillers. I like that a lot. And on the other hand, as you just explained, a way for us to understand that there's a process involved, and to be part of that process, and to see that the whole process until redemption is also holy. It's really the way God wanted it in this world, through these efforts and through the fight, through the struggle for Israel, is how you reach the miracle of Israel. Rav Mike Feuer, thank you so much for joining me for this awesome hour and a half long schmooze on Beshalach. We don't usually have this amount of time, but it worked out today, and this was the Torah portion to do it. So Rav Mike Feuer, I want people to check out your other websites at jewishstory.co and ravmike.com.
Yeah, great.
Check out your other show. Check out your other work also as, I always forget the other word, spiritual counseling. It came to me, which people can avail themselves of. That's really great stuff. Thank you so much for joining us here today on the Yishai Fleisher Show.
It's my pleasure. Shabbat shalom.
All right, Rav Mike, thanks again, and Shabbat shalom, and awesome to have you with us. And thank you for being with me here on the Yishai Fleisher Show. We have a lot of great sponsors of the show. I think you know who they are. They're the good folks at Prohibition Pickle that we talked about before. They're also at Blessed by Israel. You could buy products from the land of Israel by going to Blessed by Israel, and they'll ship to you. If the skies are closed, Blessed by Israel is still open, so check that out. Check out our good friends at our two creams. We've got Beard Balm, awesome masculinity beard balm but Hebrew masculinity. It ain't toxic. It's organic. It's organic Hebrew masculinity at olivemale.com. Check out their bombs, but asterisk, first grow a beard. Or use it in your hair. Truthfully, it's also great in the hair. Smells great, makes you feel good. Your significant other will appreciate it. So check that out. Or maybe you're looking for a prospective significant other. This shall help. That's olivemale.com. Give him coupon code Yishai10. Get 10% off. Blessed by Israel. Also, Yishai, get 12% off. Our good friends at Jerusalem Salves. How can you not want a Jerusalem salve? I want a Jerusalem salve right now. It will solve all your problems. If you just go to JerusalemSalve.com, also coupon code Yishai, get some soul glow. You'll be a different person for it. It's going to be awesome. And the Jewish community of Hebron, we protect the forefathers and mothers and keep an awesome community there in a tight spot and make it stronger and stronger, and thereby keeping the place open for the rest of us. That's hebronfund.org. And Tchelet, right? If you want to be a biblical blue Jew, the blue is back. And so go to Tchelet, Tekhelet, coupon code Yishai will get you 5% off of an awesome mitzvah. So who doesn't want that? Of course, I want you to check out our donate page, our support Yishai and the Strengthening of Israel page. At YishaiFleisher.com makes all the difference in the world. And we also have lots of other ways to support today: Venmo, Cash App, Google Pay, and we're having our Patreon upsite soon. And also we have a Google Smiles for Kuma. I'll get you the link for that soon. I'll get it for you on the next show. So we're working hard to make it easy for you to support and be part of, not even support, for you to make Israel stronger. That's what this is about. With that, I want to thank everybody, especially Moshe Herman, Tabitha, Ben Bresky, Malkon Fleisher for helping me so much, Josh Fleischer for helping me with the setup for audio video, and also, who else did I want to thank this week? The Land of Israel Network and all our other great shows here, the Land of Israel Network. Check it out, including Josh Haston and Arya Bromwitz and Jeremy Gimpel. Great stuff. Check out the Fellowship, the Land of Israel Fellowship makes awesome Sunday programming that will, if you ever felt the need to go to church, if you're of that persuasion, believe me that the Fellowship will will fulfill all of your spiritual needs. So check out our shows and all of our products. Check out YishaiFleisher.com for my articles. including and articles and events, including tonight. I'll be debating and discussing really more with Knesset member Michal Cutler-Wunsch. We'll be talking about the future of the Middle East and Israel in the Middle East. And especially the issues of Judea and Samaria. We'll be talking about that today with Knesset member Michal Cutler-Wunsch. And then tomorrow, live right here, we'll be doing a Tu B'Shvat Seder with fruits and wine, and you'll be able to join us live. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's just going to be me and Malka and you and the fruits. So thank you very much to all of our sponsors, all of our friends, and especially thank you to Hashem, to God Almighty, the God of Israel, whose abode is Yerushalayim, and who gives us the great privilege and strength to broadcast His word as best as we can. He gives us the opportunity to talk about His Torah, His world, and His vision for what this world is supposed to be. God bless you. Looking forward to hearing from you, and lots of blessings from the land of blessings. And Alice says, Shalom from Baltimore, and she adds, Lehitraot Bakarov, see you soon. And Fred Bettman says, Shabbat Shalom. And Anna says, thank you very much for great learning. And Benji Zion says, praying for a 24-hour live stream. That's a good prayer. But remember that God is broadcasting 24/7. All we have to do is tune in. God bless you and blessings from the land of blessings. And shalom.
All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed that long but awesome discussion with Rav Mike Feuer. Thank you so much. Rav Mike, you're awesome. And now let's get to my debate with a Malkon, a Copt, and an Armenian, but a well-spoken one. He is self-identified as a Palestinian. We'll get to that. And we'll talk about ethnic nationalism, which I think is one of the key questions of our time right now. Is ethnic nationalism legitimate, or is it indeed just fascism, racism, and apartheid? We'll discuss those issues coming up. And gosh, I just want you to let me know what you thought of the last half and what you think of this upcoming half by writing me an email, yishai@thelandofisrael.com or yishai@yishaifleisher.com, @yishaifleisher.com. You can connect with me with all of my content, including articles, videos, and all the stuff that we're doing. And of course, there's also a donate page there, which means that you can support and be part of it. We have so many ways to donate, including we actually also have Amazon Smiles. If you use Amazon Smiles, please look up the organization Kumah, Kumah. That's our organization, and it's a great way to donate. So without further ado, because there's more important and sadly long content, but important content here in my debate with Malkon.
To my top left, Yishai Fleisher, the international spokesperson for the Jewish community of Hebron and a broadcaster of the Land of Israel Network and a regular writer for many notable publications such as Newsweek and the New York Times. He's also a law school graduate and an advocate for Jewish rights in Judea. And to my top right, Malkon Marizian, an Armenian Palestinian from East Jerusalem, has an MA in human rights and is the founder of a cultural revolutionary movement within the Palestinian community for women's rights and working towards peaceful coexistence with Israelis through Latin dance. First topic, are settlements an obstacle to peace? Yishai, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this great opportunity. It's fun to be with this community of people that want to think about the future of Israel, Palestine, the countries around us, the Middle East. Just today, kind of the first flights have been signed between Israel and Morocco. There's some rumors on the internet that there's some discussion of a détente or understanding between Israel and Syria. I don't know if that's serious or not, but serious or not. There's also a discussion we know about Israel and Indonesia, one of the biggest Muslim countries, the biggest Muslim country in the world. And so there's a new Middle East there's a new Middle East out there that is wants to be born with Israel as part of it. Israel is a Semitic country. We are Jews, which is actually Judeans, but we are really cousins with the Arabs. We have a similar genetic code. We have a similar religion. We have a similar Semitic language. Bottom line is that we've lived in this region for the last 3,800 years. The new accords between Israel and the Sunni Arab states, and also Black African states like Sudan and Indonesia, which is not Arab but Muslim states, they're called the Abraham Accords because there's an understanding now that we are the children of Abraham. And the place that I get a chance to work every day is Hebron, which is the home of the tomb of the forefathers and mothers. And that place, the tomb of the forefathers and mothers, is one of the most special places in the world. Our forefather Abraham purchased a plot of land in Hebron 3,800 years ago. And Jews have been living in Hebron for the last 3,800 years almost without break. A few times we ran away from the Crusades and we were ethnically cleansed by the nascent Palestinian movement in 1929 by Haj Amin al-Husseini, but we returned every single time. And the reason we returned is because God knows and Allah knows that we're from this region, and we are from the holy cities, which include Be'er Sheva, which is the capital of the Negev, and they include Hebron, or Khalil in Arabic, and they include Bethlehem. Beit Lechem, our matriarch, Ruth, walked the fields where I'm looking out the window now, close here to Bethlehem. And of course, Jerusalem, the heart of our whole story. And then Bethel, or Beit El, which is where Jacob had his dream of the ladder. And Shiloh, where over 3,000 years ago, we had a tabernacle. And Shechem, or Nablus. It's all the same thing. And this is a city where the Jewish people came in with Joshua, buried the bones of Joseph, and received the Torah once again there. So this mountain range, north and south of Jerusalem, is called by the international community the West Bank. But we know it as home. We know it as Judea. This is what in the Persian Empire was called Yehud Medinta, which is the land of the Jews, the state of Judea. And that is something from the ancient past that we have never forgotten and never been broken. That tradition has never been broken. Everything about our lives is connected to this land. There are some forces out there that want to get us off of the ancestral homeland, and the reason they want to do that is because they figure if we get them out of Hebron and Jerusalem and Bethel, Beitel, we'll probably be able to get rid of the rest of them. And they use all kinds of fancy tricks. People, white people in suits and ties, sitting in places like Brussels or Krakow, in organizations like UNESCO, and they suddenly decide that the tomb of the patriarchs in Hebron is actually a Palestinian World Heritage Site, and that Israelis, Jews living in Judea, are foreigners, are somehow thieves, interlopers, occupiers. That's the magic word. Now, that word is a created word in order to make us foreigners in this land. So, for example, people like the Mullah regime in Iran, which certainly suppresses Iranian people and hates Israel and her allies, they call us occupiers. That's such a joke, since we were living in Persia way before Islam came to Persia, and we know the Persian people. We were there. We have a scroll that we remember the Persian Empire from 2,500 years ago. We are from this region. Any attempt to erase our connection to this region, to call us foreigners and occupiers and tell us that there's a different state on our land, is nothing but the great exercise in cultural appropriation and national identity theft. There's an interest in erasing our history here, erasing our presence here, and telling us that we don't belong here in order to facilitate basically the destruction of Israel. Let's just call it what it is without BSing it. Let's just be honest about what our enemies want. They tried it in warfare. They didn't succeed. Allah did not allow them to destroy us. And now they're trying it through narrative warfare, through the erasure of our history, and gaslighting us by telling us that we're not really from here. And then even some not very well educated Jews start to believe that. They're like, yeah, we're occupying somebody else's land. That is in the scientific communities called bull crap. And we are from here. We've always been here. We will always continue to be here. And with regard to Palestine, I think that there is a people's that self-identify as Palestinians. I totally understand that, and I respect their rights to have civil rights in our land. But to call for a different state and exactly in the heart of our ancestral homeland is sedition. It's an act of an enemy. And just last thing, just recently, the great wise people at Instagram have decided that I should get ads from something called Palestinian Roots. And basically, it's a clothing company which makes Palestinian roots products, including hats, socks, and Palestinian-style pajamas. One of the main logo of that map that they have of the Palestinian Roots map is a map that is strangely akin to almost identical, like we're twinsies, because their map of Palestine is exactly the map of Israel. So Instagram is showing the world Palestinian roots clothing with a map of the land of Israel. The point is that this Palestinian roots issue, which is made very physical through this line of clothing, is here to replace Israel. It's like a new kind of replacement theology. I call it replacement narrative. And we, the Jewish people, are never going to leave this place. If we're an obstacle to peace, it's because the peace that people want is not a peace, but rather to tear us into pieces and to get us out of here piecemeal. We won't let that happen. We are not an obstacle to peace for decent, non-jihadi, pro-Israel, folks that want civil rights and residency in the land of Israel. For those people, we are not obstacles to peace, and I know many Palestinians who think that way. But for those people who want to destroy Israel, we are indeed an obstacle to the destruction of Israel through the means of narrative warfare. So, in conclusion, we're going to continue to be here, and we're going to be strong. We're going to do our best to find ways to give rights to minorities that live in our land. We're going to do our best to help them live an upwardly mobile life, with opportunities, with decencies. But this is the land of the Jews. We are the sovereigns here. We welcome our brothers and sisters who want to live with us in peace. And those who want to make war will find that we are a fierce warrior state as well to defend our rights.
Thank you, Yishai. Malkon, the floor is yours, my friend.
Thank you. We have like 4 or 6 minutes. How many?
Take the time you need. Take the time you need.
Thank you, Yishai, and I respect the heart that you speak with regarding your own people, of course, regardless of how much we disagree. Now, first off, you're speaking about big chunks of stuff. First, there's identity, there's history, there's heritage, there's belonging, there's staying here no matter what, there's deletion of your identity, etc. And I want to just address the very main issue. The very main issue to any hearer who knows a bit about Palestinian-Israeli conflict is the Jewish-centeredness approach. It's like any piece of land in this life, it doesn't matter who lived in it, everybody has the right to coexist in it without people claiming this is mine more or yours less. Because the planet Earth is a gift from God. And you as a believer in God, the Creator himself said, this is not your land, but rather I am giving it to you as a gift and you are my guest. So first, we are to co-share planet Earth, although God, yes, promised, in your opinion, this land to the Jews at some point in history. But today is to coexist, and coexistence means to respecting those who already live there. So let me give you an analogy to just explain it. If I'm walking in the street and there is a table that belongs to me, and there's 2 foreign people sitting on it, do I have the right, because it belongs to me, to go even if they don't even own it? To go and pick them out by force? Well, supposedly no, immorally, no. Let alone Palestinians living there and being there, existing there. And then when you say settlements or we coming to exist and you denying our existence, it's actually the other way around. So Jewish people were always here in Palestine, Israel, land of Canaan, the land of Judah, all of those different names throughout history. And the Palestinians didn't come and kick them out. It's rather the Zionist movement that started in the 1800s. Its premise was to, unfortunately, transfer the Arabs in order to take the land. This is spoken by Ben Gurion and the founders of the movement. So who is antagonist or aggressive in this notion? It's the historical record of your own representatives and governors throughout history, or what we call colonizers. And they were proudly to call themselves colonizers also. They said it's a colonial settler movement. To us, by the way, just to clarify something to the audience, all of Israel was founded as an illegal settlement. Illegal according, by the way, to international law, although today 78% of historic Palestine, which is what they call proper, or what is called today proper Israel, is considered legally or admitted into international community, because those who control international law are the superpowers who were biased towards you at some point, at least, like the British, the US today, etc. So, but Palestinians, when you say they deny our existence, it's us who do not have a state. It's us who do not have our existence. It's us whose our name on the map has been denied. So the main approach of, it saddens me, the main approach of Jews until today to speak to the audience is to speak as if we are the victims, we are denied identity, we are denied ancestry, we are denied history, when we are the ones who are denied all of that on the ground. Like we're denied our name, we're denied the state, we Palestinian Christians, I'm a Palestinian Armenian Christian, people don't even know we exist. But at least the Jews are more known. And today there is people, if they ever mention any tragedy in the world, they mention the Holocaust. But they don't mention much the Armenian genocide or the Aramaic genocide of my grandmother or the Egyptian Copts who are being killed in Egypt or the minorities who are being killed here. And they don't mention much, but it's very centered around Jewish tragedy in order to justify a Palestinian taking over of our land, or even it's regardless of the word our land, because you use the word our a lot. I think this is the main issue. If you believe this is your land, then you're excluding the other already. But when you believe this is anyway everybody's land, every human's land, then we can coexist equally, not superiority. We're not going to coexist with you in your land because this is yours and you have more entitlement, even if everything you shared is true. I believe in the Bible. Even if everything you shared is true, regardless, whether Abraham is his older son was the father of the Arabs. And according to some, even like Yehuda HaKohen and other settlers who also are voices, they say the Hebrews come from Eber, and Eber is the very grandfather, way grandfather of Abraham. And so Arabs are also Hebrews. And so this land is also ours first, actually, because we are the elder son. Now, regardless of that, Isaac was the son of the promise, and that was another discussion. But just to say, if we're speaking of ethnic belongingness, but that's shallow, because to bring it back to our human essence, peace doesn't mean a piece of land. Peace means accepting the other and compromising, loving one another, and treating each other with equal dignity and equal respect first, not coming and forcing yourself, kicking out Palestinians, killing them, massacring us, and taking our land, removing our land, or removing our name on history on the map until today it doesn't exist. And by the way, my biggest thing is not the West Bank. The word West Bank doesn't mean much. It's the West Bank of the river. Regardless if you call it Judea, I understand you have value in the name. For me, it's about, let's call it Texas. As long as people who exist, the humans are with dignity and value, then this is it. And then they have the entitlement to define it without excluding anybody. To Jews to say Judea can exclude the Palestinians who would say it's also Palestine. So we need to find a compromise even in naming things so we don't exclude each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Malkon. Yishai, you could feel free. You can both feel free to have an open discussion now. If you want, I could give more targeted, directed questions.
Well, just a few things. First thing is I want to make it known that Malkon and I sat on a panel organized by the Bayit, and when I heard Malkon speak, I thought to myself, this guy really expresses the aspirations of Palestinians very well. And I thought to myself, he has a language that I think is fabulous. And I wanted to debate with him today and discuss with him today because I just think that he is a person, just a high quality person, well-spoken, and I think represents really well. And so it's an honor to discuss somebody on his level, with somebody on his level. That's number one. On the other hand, the thing about Malkon is that he is also a mystery to me. You are a mystery to me, Malkon. And the reason you're a mystery to me is actually you come from some of the oldest civilizations in this region. You come from the Copts, which are one of the oldest Christian groups. They even think of themselves, a lot of Copts intellectuals think of themselves as pharaonic, which means that they think themselves as pre-Christian, pre-Greek, and really coming from the real original Egyptians that make up about 10% of Egypt today. And you come also from the Armenians, which are at least a 2,600-year-old state. 2,600-year-old state. We're talking about a really ancient civilization. Armenia is today actually one of the greatest examples of an ethnic national state. Where your father comes from is 98%. 98% of it, 98.1% is Armenian ethnically. And it's an ethnic national state of 3 million people. It's quite a bit bigger. It's about 30,000 square kilometers as opposed to Israel's 22,000 square kilometers. It's a small country, but it's bigger than Israel. And it's just a total ethnic national state and a Christian one and an ancient one. Now, you come from these two ancient Christian sects, and somehow you've tied yourself to the Palestinian identity, which is an identity that barely existed 100 years ago, and has been formulated. And there's many Jordanian spokesmen and kings, and then Saudi Arabian who all say, "Oh yeah, we totally created the Palestinian identity so that we could fight Israel. We're really pan-Arabist." And those guys on top of that are Muslims of various varieties that are persecuting the Copts today in Egypt, and of course the famous, which you mentioned, the famous Armenian genocide, which we just remembered 100 years of, and so commemorated 100 years of. And I'm amazed at you, as both a Copt and an Armenian, who have been persecuted by Islam, who have a much more ancient identification, which is much closer to the Jewish identification of an ancient people. Plus, you're Christian, which means that you recognize that a man named Jesus walked this land 2,000 years ago, and you know that he was a Jew walking in this land in a state of Judea, right, in a kingdom of Judea. In his time, it was the Second Commonwealth. And yet, with all these things that make you obviously a person who should be on the side of defending Jewish rights in this land, somehow you have come to be a defender of the Palestinian identity, which your churches, I have right here, the Maronite Church, which you are related to as well, in Bethlehem, has been subjected to the acts of vandalism and theft. Just recently, there have been 6 attempts to destroy this church, and we know the Palestinian Authority, what they do. And I guess it's sad to me that what really is sad to me is that people like Malkon, who I really respect, sadly, I think that he has come under dehimitude, which is the subjugation of minorities in this region under a violent type of form of Islam. And he's now come to defend them instead of realizing that the only place where Christians have any defense in this region is under Israel. And I'm actually, if I want to criticize my country, Israel, I would say that the greatest sadness for me in this whole debate is that Israel, the Jewish state, hasn't managed to give people like Malkon a safe identity to be able to be like, you know what, I am an Armenian, I am a Copt, but I live in Israel, I live in the old city, and I'm not a Jew, but I'm okay with being in the Jewish state. And that, to me, the fact that Israel hasn't been able to give him a sense of safety for that identity, it saddens me. And I think it's a great loss because we need a man like him on our side, if we can say that. With regarding to the rest of the stuff that Malkon said about equality, human rights, and everybody's equal, and it's all about love, and it's all about living together on this land and sharing. That's all fluff. That's just fluff. And the reason that's fluff is because in this region, tribal peoples own their tribal lands, control it, and make sure that nobody else comes and takes it over. They control their wells like they did in the Bible. They control their borders, and they make sure that people that don't hate them don't come into their land and try to take it away. We, the Jewish people, are a small ethnic national state defending our tribal lands. That is the way of this region. And any talk about equality and love and togetherness and share the land, that's all fluff, because at the end we have to defend ourselves. And yes, we have to give decent minorities opportunities for a life here, but we're not going to give up the sovereignty of this country. That would be the end of us. We're not going to do that, just like Armenia doesn't want to give up a piece of land to Azerbaijan recently in Nagorno up there, the conflict. They fight for what they think is theirs. I'm sure that Armenia would love to see the Ararat mountain range come back from Turkey, which was taken from them by Turkey, in an amazing occupation. So to me, I can't believe that a good man like Malkon is on the side of really the real occupiers and the real takers away of human and civil rights.
Shai, thank you first for your respectful, nice admiration of me as a person. I also respect and honor you. However, I'll tell you several things. You're addressing me as a person, which I will. First, regardless of the richness or whether my identity is related to this region or not, the biggest value for me as a person and for any supposedly person who claims to be a Christian is a principle of justice. And love is the essence and the foundation of justice and equality. I will be just with people or with my children because I love them. But if I don't love my children, I would just not care if they abuse each other. That's the essence of justice. It is the source of love. And that's why we say God is love. Now back to the idea of criticizing Islam. And I know this is a conversation that I hear from respectfully my Jewish counterparts all the time, everywhere. Like, why do you identify even as a Palestinian? Or why do you defend the Muslims? Didn't they do this to you, etc., etc.? Well, two wrongs don't make a right. First, even if I assume that Muslims made worse to us, although it's not in this context, comparison with the occupation of today, I'm saying there's no comparison of how Muslims treat us as opposed to Israelis. Israelis prevent us from moving freely. They intervene of who we get married to. My sister-in-law cannot have residency. She cannot work. She cannot travel. She cannot drive. She cannot travel with her husband, who's my brother, just because she's a Christian Palestinian from Ramallah, the West Bank, and he's a Palestinian Christian from East Jerusalem. Intervening in the very institution of love, which is family, is the biggest crime against humanity because it's against the whole foundation of any community. So Palestinian Muslims do not prevent us to have citizenship or nationality based because we are different ethnicities. They do not demolish our houses. They do not take away our vineyards. They do not cut off our olive trees. They do not throw stones at us when we're walking around simply because we are Palestinian or we are, in this case, how settlers treat us. And they don't do, the list goes on and on and on and on. So there's no comparison with the suffering. But I'm not saying there's no Palestinian Muslim discrimination against Palestinian Christians. We speak it, we tell them actually, because I believe I'm a founder of an internal revolutionary movement within the Palestinian community itself to bring about such voices. So I'm not ashamed of anything like this. I tell it to my brothers and sisters' face, who are my Palestinian brothers and sisters. But that's a family issue. Unfortunately, the Jewish nation does not treat us as family. Rather, they treat us as foreigners, which you mentioned. We see you as foreigners because if somebody comes and kills me, that's a foreigner. That's not telling me I'm family. In 1948, in 1915, we ran from the genocide. And by the way, my grandmother is Aramaic. We are the ancestors of Abraham. It's not only Armenian. We descend from the youngest son of Noah, from Japheth, not the youngest. And Aramaics, we descend from the eldest son, Shem. And then Egyptians, we descend from the middle son, although it's a controversial who is the middle son, but let's say from Ham anyway. And so we are the ancestors of Abraham. We are here also, we are part of this Aramaic, Semitic, from Shem, the eldest, or Melchizedek, according to the biblical, how he's viewed. So in that being said, we ran from the genocide to Syria in 1915. Then we came to Palestine. We were kicked out by Israel as Palestinian, Armenians, Christian, Aramaic people being here. So our houses in Jaffa were taken away. Our shops in West Jerusalem were taken away. And then my father alone, unfortunately, came back. And I say unfortunate because he had to face expulsion over 10s and 20s, like a lot of times, back and forth between the 70s and 80s until he was able to settle down and get married and being able to be given residency. He was very humiliated. In 2001, I was shot at twice by Israeli soldiers for no reason. Now, for me, as a man who holds value or claim to hold value for dignity and equality, I should at least defend the unjust as well as I defend any persecution against the Jews, whether it's the Inquisition of Spain, whether it's anything before, whether even the Egyptian slavery in the Bible, whether it's whatever it is, not only the Holocaust, because it's the main topic. I stand, because any injustice against any human person, according to the Bible, born or created in the image of God, equally created in the image of God, is an abomination, is sin, is evil, is destructive. So I need to stand against it. So so for me to call myself a Palestinian, first, Palestinian is a pluralistic identity. Now, very quickly before I finish, just to honor your points that you raised. And Palestinian can mean Armenian. We've been here, by the way, 2,700 years. We ruled our empire in 738 BC. Our Tigran mates, our ruler at the time, he ruled the Galilee. Now, we never come back and say this is historic Armenia, with all due respect to you, as the Jews come back and say, well, this is historic Judea and we should claim it back. As well as the Persians came here and ruled, and the Greeks and the Romans and the Egyptians, and you name it, so many nations, and the Ottomans and the Albanians, who are the Mamluks, and so many, they cannot just come back and say, oh, well, this is Albania, well, this is Persia, well, this is Egypt. Well, that doesn't work. Well, Palestine is the word. Yes, it comes from the word Philistine, but today it's the inclusive word, and has been the inclusive word of all nations and multi-nations. That doesn't narrow down our identity. And being a Palestinian identity, as you said, we created in 100 years, nations and ethnicities develop. The Jewish nation in particular, exceptionally because there is a written code to it, it was a more kind of clearer identity, because there was, according to them at least, a divine purpose for that identity. But all other identities, Prussia was there a few hundred years ago. Now there's no Prussia. Germany was not there a few hundred years ago. Now we have Germany. So, like, just Czech Republic was not there. There was Slovakia and Czech Republic together just a few, like, less than 30, 40 years ago. So we have different nations developing all the time. Names of streets are developing all the time. Names of countries, because people give it meaning. And this is the value of humans above places. We give meaning to places. Places is not the ones who founded us. We founded planet Earth, or we founded not in that created, but we gave it meaning. Without planet Earth, without humans, there is no either names, America, US, Israel, etc. There's no names if there's no people. We have the consciousness, we have the intelligence, we have all of those abilities that we gave.
I want to say this honestly for everybody. For me, it's so fun to speak with Malkon because he's a Christian, he also talks Bible, understands the Bible, it's meaningful to him, and that's just fun. And you don't get a lot of Palestinian discourse on that level. And also, you could just feel the ancientness of his lineage in this region, and just that's just cool. That is just cool. And one of the things I have to be jealous of Malkon of is that he never get, his people, his different peoples have faced all kinds of persecution, but they never really, they got killed to the tune of 250,000 by the Armenian genocide by the Turks, but they never left this region. He was never exiled from this region, and he can talk about being here straight for the last, almost 3,000 years. And I can't, because our people, our empire was destroyed. Our two commonwealths were destroyed. We were exiled, and we're coming back. And that makes us, I guess, less indigenous, because we kind of are, we had to leave and we're coming back. But to make one Middle Eastern point, which I find to be kind of funny, is that Malkon said a few minutes ago, he said, can the Mamluks come back and rule this land? Can the Persians come back and rule this land? Malkon, I got news to tell you. The Iranian Persian mullah regime, they want this land. They also want Saudi Arabia and Mecca and Medina, but they want Israel. Turkey, the neo-Turkish, neo-Ottoman movement, they want this land. And, they're not joking. They easily take control of regions, that they, occupy half of Cyprus, and they'd be very happy to reoccupy this land. Arab armies, they came here in order to do just that, which is they said, Islam controlled this land in the past. We want to recontrol it. And if you think about it, what is Palestine but wanting control of this land as opposed to having us control the land? Like, in all of your discourse, one thing doesn't make exactly sense. Like, why not have the Jews control this land? Okay, so Arabs control 22 countries, 5 million square kilometers. Israel is 1/4% of the landmass. Arabs have 400 million Arabs living in this region, and we have 6 and a bit. Why? Like, so on all the stuff that you said, other than one point, which I'll make in a second, which is like, okay, so why can't, like, if Armenia controls Armenia, why can't the Jews control Judea? Like, what's wrong with that? Now, if you say to me that Israel hasn't done a great job of making sure that people have decency, certain equalities, civil rights, and we've been not so great at that, I say, partially, I agree. Partially, I disagree with you. I think that Israel has given upward mobility to tons of people, including opportunities for great education. This whole thing that you said about Ramallah and Arabs living in Ramallah, it's a little bit false, because you kind of forgot to mention that the Arabs live in Ramallah live in sadly a different, under a different political entity called the Palestinian Authority, which is many times in conflict with Israel, and that's why your sister-in-law and folks are behind a kind of a different system. It's not because Israel doesn't want to give them this. That's because it's like, sadly, it's a different country. But to me, Israel has also not done a great job at bringing everybody in that would be decent. They haven't made it clear. I offer much clearer alternatives for Palestinians, for Muslims, Christians, whoever it is, for Druze, which is residency in the land of Israel with civil equality, but not necessarily national equality, because this is our tribal land and we don't want to get voted out by our own democracy. But we certainly respect the fact that people have decencies and rights and should have opportunities in Israel. But the state is going to be run by the Jews. I don't think anybody should be throwing rocks at you, and I certainly don't think anybody should be shooting at you. I don't know what the circumstances of those are. You know, we have shootings and an army that shoots because we're a very defensive state. Sadly, we've been under war for the last 100 years. It's been an Arab war. It's been a Palestinian war. It's been a terror war. It's, you know, to deny that and to make it look like Israel's this like big aggressor, it's just BS, because Israel is a tiny Jewish state, defensive. And sadly, when you're a defensive state and a militarized state, you end up hurting decent and good people, probably like yourself. I say probably because I don't know what the circumstances were, and I don't want to besmirch my army and my defense establishment because you say so. I don't want to do that, but I guess that's probably right. I've seen incidences when good people get targeted, and it's a shame. But I promise you that if the arms were laid down, and I think we're living in a time where Israel is starting to become more accepted in this region, I think that the minorities that are loyal, and when I say loyal, by the way, that's exactly how it is in every other state in this region. All the countries around here are ethnic national states. None of them are democracies, not a one. There's no Arab democracy, not even close, nothing. And so we have an ethnic national state. We should be giving decencies and opportunities to loyal minorities that want to live, including people like yourself. And that's it. I'm looking forward to moving forward because as I said before, we're not going to be leaving, and I don't think you've made a case for why we should be leaving, and you certainly don't want to believe that a Palestine is going to be more pluralistic than Israel is. That's just I don't know what to say. That's just imagination, or at least in my mind, that's imagination. I'll give you the respect that maybe you believe differently, but in my mind, that's imagination. A Hamas state, which is exactly what would happen if, God forbid, Israel would leave its ancestral land, is not going to be more pluralistic than the Israel that you're a resident in. That's my belief anyway. And I think we should be doing a better job to address those problems that you mentioned. But in the meantime, in the last 100 years, we're the best thing in human rights that this region has seen for the last 2,000 years.
Shai, I hear you, but you're saying about the words moving forward and stuff, and we spoke now about history, identity, etc. But the question on the ground, if somebody comes every day and he tells you, let's move forward, but he slaps you on one cheek. Next day, he tells you, let's move forward. He slaps you again. Third day, he does it again. Can we really have peace or moving forward with somebody who says, well, I have to slap you daily, but let's move forward? So settlements, back to the very question that Adar presented. Settlements are based on confiscating Palestinian land, claiming them to be military zone or nature reserves, and then building settlers or settlement, which is against the Geneva Convention, against international law, and against morality, and taking land by force, slapping on the face, to say the least. If you own a car, you're free to answer the question or not. I hope you would. If you own a car and somebody comes to you and says, well, maybe he believes God gave it to him or promised it to him, or he believes this is he's more entitled because he used to have ancestors using that car before. But now you own it. And he comes to you and he kicks you out by force, or he kicks you out through manipulative means. Would that promote moving on? Or would that just promote theft? And what about the one who would move on? So the Palestinians would say, okay, well, let's move on. Let's give you our car. Let's give you our house. Let's give you our vineyards. Let's give you our olive trees. Let's give you our farmlands. Let's give you that. And that's how you move on. And I don't know if you're aware of the joke, not to provoke you, that speaks about how Israeli politics play around, or what means peace to them means. It's a piece of this land, a piece of this other land, a piece of this other land, a piece of this other land. Rather than peace, which means, in Hebrew, shalom means fullness, completeness. And peace in English or Arabic, salam, or it can mean inner peace and inner, like the ability to rest rather than being in conflict. The ability to rest and being in love with others, or being loved or accepted or accepting others. So if somebody is slapping you, he's not really letting you to be at rest when you're telling, oh, well, we want peace, but you have the power to take land, Yishai. So please address that. You have the power to control. You have the occupational power, or you don't like the word occupation. Colonizing power, of course, you hate it more. Whatever. You have the military power. You have the armed power. You have the weaponry power. You have the power to take or leave. So it's up to you. So you can bring peace in one moment. But the victims, or the weaker, or the oppressed, in our opinion at least, Palestinians, we cannot bring peace because we cannot control what we perceive as the oppressor, or the stronger, let's at least call him. We cannot control the bully guy with big muscles when we are only two children. All we could do is try to bring those healthy pressure from other big guys. Tell them, please just put healthy pressure on this guy to stop bullying us and slapping us daily, because we can. And then Hamas comes with this small child, if I want to give you an example of this analogy, and says, well, I found a knife, let's kill this bully. And the bully has 5 knives on him, let alone being big muscular guy. How stupid is that? Yeah, Hamas way of military or response is stupid, but it's coming out of a cry for justice and freedom to say, well, despite being the weak, I am the one I can still defend myself. I don't believe in the methodology. It's bringing way more harm than good. Why? Because if you want to kill suddenly the bigger bully guy or the big muscular guy and your 2 children, well, he can just cut you in half because he can. Okay, and so he can use this power or abuse that power against you, whatever you want to call. So if we want to settle down the conversation to the rest of the few minutes, or how much ever we have, how are settlements moving us forward, since they are the ones since 1967? Even Joe Biden himself, the new elected US, he said in the 60s to Golda Meir, he said to her, what you're doing in the West Bank, it was around 1,000 units at the time of settlement, confiscate. He said, what you're doing is deleting the 2-state solution. And so I know you don't want a 2-state solution, but I'm saying even with that, coming and stealing land to delete the 2-state solution. If you want a full 1-state solution, Palestinians want a 1-state solution, even without the 67. Let's all live under, let's even call it Israel, but equal rights, equal opportunity, equal political rights. Not, oh no, we have to always be sovereign over you. That's racism. That's apartheid. Apartheid is putting one race over another. Apartheid is not always like South Africa, and it's not always like the US in history, US blacks and whites. Apartheid has different forms. It's never identical apartheid system. So when I read even B'Tselem lately, they said Israel is an apartheid. So apartheid is apartness. It comes from the Afrikaans word, which means to stay apart. Yeah, we live together and we share some stuff, but we're still apart. As you said, national rights? No. So what is that? And who entitles who? And how can you force? So many questions I'm putting here. But can you force people to believe in the notion of how you believe God gave it to you? If you genuinely believe this is the land that God gave to you, and I respect that faith, can you force that faith on others? Well, the answer is no. But then this forcefulness, is it actually pro-God of the Bible? The one who says treat foreigners equally to you in the Old Testament or in the Tanakh? In the New Testament, he says, love your enemies to us. And the whole form of land was fulfilled in the person of Jesus, the Messiah. That's why the Messiah came, and the land was to bring the Messiah. The Messiah already came in our perspective. There's no more need for a land for a specific people group. It's rather now for the global human race to know the essence of God's love and to live together equally. And that translates itself spiritually today, politically, nationally, civil rights, all of those things. From that notion, there's a one ultimate father, God. Not Abraham, with all due respect to Abraham. His ultimate father, founder of life, God, who treats everybody, male and female, equally also, not only male, and all other nations and ethnicities. Please.
Yishai, real quick, you'll have full time to respond to all the points Malkon made. I just want to provide clarity on something that you're both getting at, just from different directions, and this will help us lead into what can we do to move forward. So, Yishai, you've mentioned how you want Palestinians, Armenian Christians, you want them to be part of Israel. You want them to accept the Israeli identity. Now, I view that as commendable. You and I probably have differences in what that would look like, but it's commendable because most Israelis don't even want to address that situation because they don't even know what it would look like. So I do appreciate the fact that you view that as important to bring these people in. Now, what Malkon's saying, and I think it's a good point, he says, how can we accept a national identity that's caused us so much harm? It's a national identity that historically has oppressed us, and today, we live under another nation's military law. So I guess, and he sees settlements as just strengthening that, right? Our security is a collective punishment for Palestinians. It's an inherent challenge that is very hard to solve. For us to stay safe, we need to, we need to commit collective punishment towards the Palestinians. So given that, how could we even expect them to accept the Israeli national identity? I don't have an answer, but I just wanted to put this point out there. This does lead us in what can we do moving forward, because I think this is part of solving the conflict.
First thing is that there's been a whole lexicon of words that has been thrown out. And I must redefine a few small points here in order to get the conversation going, because I simply cannot accept some of the words that were said for any meaningful conversation to go forward. I just have to stop and say, I cannot talk like this. If I cannot accept these things and have to put that down on record. First thing is that modern day liberals are using the word apartheid or fascism in the place of nationalism. Now, about 100 years ago, when there was an idea of birth of nations, of self-determination, the idea that ethnic peoples would live on their land with their language, with their calendars, with their customs, was considered the height of liberalism. We were going to be a family of nations, each people's living on their land. Again, I remind you, Armenia, where Malkon hails from in part, is the penultimate ethnic national state, an ancient people living on their land, speaking their language with their almost totally pure, no other peoples live. It's 98% ethnic Armenians live in Armenia. So the idea of ethnic national states is not apartheid, and nor is it fascism. It's actually the height of liberalism. And the next word is settlements and the Geneva Convention. This is our land. It really is. It's so simple that sometimes a lot of words get it confused, and I like to break it down to simple things. It's our land. We're not stealing anybody else's land. It wasn't Palestinian land. We're not expropriating other people's land. In fact, we have 5 loci of rationales why it's our land. The first one is, you know what? I won't say the first one. I'll say it in a different order. A logical order is purchase. We've purchased much of the land of Israel from Arab owners, absent real estate, landowners who are living in Syria. We purchased this land. We have that on record. It's in Turkish records as well. We've purchased much of this land. Second, with all due respect to the pathos of victimization narrative that Malkon is telling us, we all know that Arabs have attacked Israel to destroy it and to throw it into the sea, into the language of Egyptian rulers in the past, that they're going to finish the work of the Holocaust. Let's be real here. Let's be real about this. This victimization narrative is here to create a completely backwards mirror image where the poor Palestinian is suffering, but the Jew is this aggressive army. It's just a false narrative. The Jews have been under attack here for 100 years since we really started coming back home strong. The Palestinian and Pan-Arab movement have wanted to destroy us through and through. Now their new tactics, now that they've admitted that they can't beat us in war, is this narrative war, which I'm sad that Malkon is using this language of apartheid and occupation and the Fourth Geneva Convention. What kind of malarkey is that? This is our land. We're not putting people in somebody else's land and moving them into. This is the heart of Judea, and he knows that. He knows this was Judea. So I don't understand that. And finally, one last word about Hamas. Malkon made a pass of saying that Hamas can be understood because they're coming from victimization. Malkon, Hamas is part of the Islamic Brotherhood, which comes from Egypt. They want an Islamic revolution in Egypt. Nothing to do with Israeli occupation, nothing to do with the victimization pathos that you keep kind of parroting. It's not from that at all. They want an Islamic takeover. They're about jihad. And to deny that and to turn it into, well, they're victims, and they don't talk about themselves being victims. They talk about cleaning the Jews from Islamic lands through jihad. That's famous Arafat quote. That's what they're about. They're coming from Egypt from a completely different reason. And to make them into these like sad victims that go into murdering Jews and children because of their victimization, it's to me, I can't accept that kind of language. Now, moving forward, I say very simply, because I believe in nationalism, which is the right of ethnic peoples to live on ancestral land, and I believe that Israel is an ethnic national state. I believe that our state, like any state like Armenia, would want to defend and to help promote our ethnicity because it's an ethnic national state. That being said, as the Torah says, and as rationality says, and as actually the League of Nations mandate for Palestine said, that the non-Jewish minorities living in this land should have civil rights and upward mobility, inequalities, and civil rights. When it comes to voting in our statewide democracy, I don't believe in that as much. I believe that it should be residency with local voting for Arab cities or Palestinian cities like Hebron, like Ramallah. I think that people that predominantly live in, let's say, an Arab city, a Palestinian city, can vote for their own mayors and do their own stuff internally, have their own kinds of courts and judges. But of course, they should be residents of the state of Israel, pay taxes to the state of Israel. The state of Israel should make sure that there's good sewage, good roads, good education, good health care, good upward mobility, good access to universities. I believe very much in minorities having residency in our land with upward mobility. Of course, as long as they're non-jihadist and are loyal. A great example of that is the Druze in Israel, who just today I spoke to my friend Atta Farhat from the Druze Zionist Council. The Druze are, what's the difference between a Druze and a Palestinian? There's only one thing that is a difference between a Druze and a Palestinian. They have a different religion. They may have some different genes or not. But the main thing is that what's in here is different. One, the Druze are about loyalty. And the Palestinian movement in general, and today I know hundreds of Palestinians, and they represent tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who are not with this, But the Palestinian Authority and Hamas are jihadists. They're jihadists. They're not about liberation and victimization, all that stuff. They're about jihadism and the destruction of Israel for a Islamic goal and a nationalist goal, which has nothing to do with victimization and peace. It's about destroying Israel. Many Palestinians today don't want this anymore. They want to move over to the Abraham Accords, to the Druze outlook, towards living as residents of the state of Israel, maybe even citizens. I'm less in favor of that, but friends on the nationalist camp believe that as well, that loyal minorities should have a pathway to citizenship. That's also should be contemplated. I myself am not in favor of that. I'm in favor of the Torah's outlook of what's called ger toshav, resident alien. If you respect us, and this is, by the way, the plain rules of the Middle East. If you respect us, and you can live in our land peacefully without trying to undermine us, we want you to be successful. I want, as a sovereign, for my minorities, if they are in the old city of Jerusalem or in Ramallah or in Hebron, to have success, to have success, to all have success, and to be upperly mobile, as long as they don't try to undermine the sovereign, which is my ethnic national state, which is called Israel, which is the way all the other countries around here are. So that's the way forward, I think, and all the other ways. And here's my last point here. I'm saddened about the stuff that Malkon says because it damns the next generation of Palestinians to endless conflict. That's what saddens me, because this ideology that claims that we're foreigners and occupiers and land thieves, this ideology will only lead the next generation of Palestinian children to continue to believe in this brainwashing and therefore revolt against Israel, and then end up getting messed up in the security apparatus and going to jail and learning more bad things. And you're damning a whole generation for continued lack of success, lack of upward mobility. If I'm a Palestinian listening to what you're saying, I'm saying, damn it, Malkon, get us off of this track already. Put us on the track of real life, real opportunity, because Israel isn't going anywhere. If I can't convince you of Herzl or of the Bible, if I can't convince you of all that, that's fine. I did my best. But you have to understand, we're not leaving. In true and honesty, we're not in South Africa here. We're not whites in South Africa. We're from here. And if you don't understand that we're never leaving, that we're going to continue the so-called settlements, and if you're going to damn the next generation to continue fighting against us, you will be killing them. And I'm giving them an opportunity to step away from all that ideology and to move forward towards work, towards peace, towards self-fulfillment, towards a beautiful house. And if people don't want that, they can also find their self-determination and their personal success in other Arab countries or in the Western world. But if you want to stay here in Israel, be loyal. You'll get the benefits of the state. I will work on Israelis to be more accepting of minorities. I've been doing that. But don't damn the next generation to endless war, because it will lead to nothing. And that's what the Abraham Accords is about. In part, Arabs are starting to understand Israel isn't actually going to leave these places. They're never going to go. They're never going to leave Hebron. It's not going to happen. And therefore, let us now accept it and move forward, really in a pathway of rationality, love, and peace.
Thank you, Yishai. Malkon, real quick, because I also just want to direct your response just a little bit, because Yishai did share his vision for what he thinks the land should look like and what Palestinians' place in this land should be. I want to know from you if you think that is by any means an acceptable solution. If not, what's missing? And what you think. He did mention the future generation. I think it's very important to focus on the future generation. What lessons how we need to raise the future generation in order to be one that can make peace on this land. This is relevant for both Israelis and Palestinians.
Yeah. I think in a nutshell, if I understand Yishai right, I don't want to assume, he can correct me later, that we can have civil rights, but we cannot have kind of equal national rights to Israeli sovereignty, being in what he believes is Israel only or mainly. Yes, it's unacceptable. It's based on racism, denying the other his full rights as a human, only parts of his rights because his race is different, and the other part is not acceptable because he's not Jewish. So this is racism. It implies from somebody like Yishai who believes in God that God is racist.
And just, Malkon, just one question. Is Armenia a racist country?
I will answer you. So that God, or the version of the God that's communicated here, is racist. And so that's up to him if he wants to represent God in this way today. Now, to continue on regarding, he mentioned Armenia a few times. Armenia, we do not have any racial laws. We have Yazidis, we have Jews, we have minorities such as Iranians. We do not have racial laws saying, you cannot, you're not entitled to nationality. For example, we have Syriacs, Aramaics, we have Armenian nationality. They're born with it. They speak Armenian. They can speak their own language. That's in current Armenia. And Armenia was not based on coming suddenly by being kicked out for so long and saying, we want to have a war to liberate our and kick out the people who are already there. That's not the current Eastern Armenia based upon. And you mentioned a while ago about Nagorno-Karabakh, or Artsakh, we say in Armenian. Artsakh, we lived in it since 9th century BC. We have trained evidence from the 4th century BC. And what happened, the same story of Palestine. In 1921 or 23, Stalin decided he wants to give Artsakh, the Armenian 94% majority, to Azerbaijan, like the British decided to promise Palestine, which was way more than 90% Palestinian Arab majority, to the Jews.
Just to remind you that it wasn't the British, it was 56 countries, the whole League of Nations unanimously voted to accept the idea of Jewish sovereignty in the land of Israel, a Jewish homeland in the land of Israel. It wasn't just the British. The British were given the mandate from the League of Nations to help create that, and the world all accepted the premise that Jews belonged here because of their historic rights in this land. So just to remind you, that's the original and actually controlling international law in this issue.
I hear you. Maybe there is not much time to comment on that, but I'll comment quickly. I have a master's in international law. The League of Nations does not have any authority to give anybody any authority over any piece of land, just to put you in the picture. That's
but you said before that Israel is illegal under international law set by the UN. So the UN, which accepted the League of Nations, it has no legal validity. Which one is it?
I'll tell you. So it has a legal validity under what we call Security Council, Chapter 7. So any decision made by the Security Council, which the U.S. keeps vetoing for the favor of Israel, is considered legally binding. Now, whatever is outside of that, we call it resolutions, which are mere recommendations. They are suggestions. So when they, for example, they made a resolution of 181, the partition plan, it was a suggestion. It was not legally binding that Israel should have now the partition given to her, and the Palestinians should have it was not. All Palestinians had the full right to say no. This is in short. And back in the 20, when I said Stalin didn't make anything legal or illegal. He made something immoral in our eyes, at least as Armenians, when he gave Artsakh away. But the international community considered legalized it as Azerbaijan. Why? Because they followed the colonizers or the colonists' decisions, because they were the superpowers. Otherwise, they wouldn't be going into loops of, what land belongs to who now? Because it will be a long journey of history. Who belongs where?
Does Nagorno-Karabakh or Artsakh belong to Armenia or not?
Historically, of course.
So they have a right to fight for that, so continue to be Armenia, am I right?
They have the right to fight for that. I don't believe in wars. I personally don't believe in wars. But we have the right to... You don't believe
that they happen, or you don't believe it's a good idea?
I don't believe it's a good idea. I don't believe that war is God's way today. That's why Jesus said, love your enemies. That's the concept of the new covenant. That's the foundation of my philosophy.
Would you recommend to Armenians to walk away from Nagorno-Karabakh so as that they could avoid war?
We already, by the way, lost the war, unfortunately.
I know you lost, and that's sad to me, but that's besides the point.
Would I tell them?
Would you tell them, just walk away? There's no point in fighting for it.
Yeah, I'll tell them.
This area that you controlled since the 6th century BC.
Okay, so sure. I'll tell them the following, Yishai. Because I value my Armenian soul and the Armenian people way more than Armenian territory, I would tell them if there's gonna be blood as a possibility, yes, walk away. Because your lives are more important than land. And you know what? If I were living in Hebron, and you, with all due respect to you, although you don't live in Hebron, you come to me when I kick me out, either kick me out, kill me, or take the land, I'll give you my land and my cars and my vineyards, because I value my life and the life of my children, as I think God values the human life way more than my life. And actually, I value my enemy's life, because the other plan is just to kill him. Maybe I will have the chance to kill him. But if I have the chance to leave, to give him land, okay, that's called a human greed. Yeah, you get the land. That's the thief. That's how the thief gets. Not you, person. I'm just saying, the person who wants to he gets the land. Yes, he gets the car if he wants to steal my car by force. But is that more important than mine?
When you saw the loss of the war of the territory of Nagorno-Karabakh to part of Nagorno-Karabakh to Azerbaijan, did you feel okay inside with it, or did you feel, boy, that's wrong, that they, again we're being victimized, somebody's trying to take our land, and that's wrong, and Russia didn't come and help us? Did you feel a little disappointment, or did you say, well, they might as well just walk away?
I hear you, but the problem with your argument, with all due respect, Brother Yishai, that you are as if saying Armenians are like Jews. It's the opposite. Armenians are like Palestinians.
That's where we disagree, my friend. That's where we disagree exactly. I say to you that Israel is a lot more like Armenia, and the Judea and Samaria are exactly like Nagorno-Karabakh. Exactly.
But we disagree, and it's okay. We disagree. Before we finish, because Adar wants to take over, I just want to say this. Just very important to note, whatever you mentioned about history, and I mentioned about history, although I didn't mention much, we have two versions of history. I'm a geopolitical tour guide. I do something called dual narrative tour, and we bring an Israeli tour guide. I'm a Palestinian guide, and we share the two different narratives. I don't believe, and I do believe, there is a falsification of history by your narrative, and you believe the same from mine. Let's realize this, and this is where I think you have the power to falsify history, and you have way more advantage to do it because you are in power. Whereas, as it says in the ones in power who write are the ones who write history. But the weaker, I think that's the voice of justice. Not always, but this might be for me is a higher probability, and there is way more evidence for me in the course of history and this course of history that I read objectively as much as I could to believe, and I'm open to both narratives. I emptied myself from my national identity because humanity is more important to me, including the Jewish people, even Jewish enemies, to reach into a conclusion of history. And yes, I found Palestinians who have been massacred. You mentioning very quickly, we are small nations, defenseless. History doesn't show that. On 1948, there was only 24,000 to 26,000 Arab soldiers versus 36 to 39,000 Jewish soldiers. There is no miracle in that to defeat the smaller number who are the Arabs in this case. Believe it or not, the Arab nations were just being left out from the British and the French mandate. They did not have much bigger armies and bigger weapons, as opposed to the Jews who have been trained like the Haganah by the British themselves, equipped from the World War II, where they fought, and they came already equipped in many ways. They already had more power, physical power. There's nothing miraculous. There's nothing more defensive.
And there's many more Jews than Arabs. Is that what you want to tell me? I mean, really, you want to tell me that the 6 Arab armies that joined in to try to destroy Israel 3 times were smaller than the Jewish army? This is revisionism par excellence. And you're right, just what you said before. I think that you're revising history, and I think that the creation of a Palestinian victim identity is an Arab trick, which many times the Arabs have actually said that. There's many videos just on YouTube. You could say that, like, we created this identity so that we could basically look smaller than the Jews, which is tricky because the Jews are really pretty tiny. But no, there are 400 million Arabs, and there are 22 Arab countries. There's one Jewish state with 6.5 million Jews. Let's be real about who the minority in this region is.
I was speaking about the war, not about the number of people in general, Yishai. But just to end with this, with the following. Today, on the ground, whatever you claim, with all due respect, the last sentence I would say, is false as long as you cannot prove that you are today the victim. Doesn't matter if you are presenting yourself as the victim. Today you have the power to control my life, control my destiny, govern me, force me out, force me in freedom of movement or against my freedom. Even my marriage, the institution of marriage, as I mentioned, demolishing of my house, travel insurance, visas, in citizenship, nationality or not, residency or not, permit or not. You control every bit, water resources, the vineyards, everything that has access, the 140 checkpoints that exist only in the West Bank, and 21 of them are mainly in Hebron. All of you control our lives. There is no like this victim, whatever you today here convey doesn't bring any value for if the listener is a genuine listener. If looking at the fact that you guys are in power, and if you believe you have more conscience, and I do believe in you, I don't want to accuse you of not. If you believe you have moral conscience, then do something about it. You have, because you are more powerful, and stop this discriminatory regime against the Palestinians. That's it.
I just want to say that Malkon made a philosophical point, which him and I disagree on, not on history and not on who's the victim, but just a philosophical point, which they call today plight makes right. The greater victim has a greater truth. I do not believe that. I just don't believe that. I believe that the Jewish people have been victims. Today we have strength, and I want to say that everything that you said about us having power and all that, I say, Baruch Hashem, thank God that we have stopped a cycle of violence of the last 2,000 years of persecution. And I am thankful that God has given us the ability to stand up against our murderers and against our enemies. And I'm not going to, for 1 second, apologize for Jewish strength. Not for 1 second. Many of my co-religionists feel uncomfortable with Jewish strength. I have no problem with that. Again, we're our protectorate, a small, tiny fraction of the Middle East. Yes, this is our ancestral land, and we have to defend ourselves. And we're under attack all the time from bad guys and from nice guys who don't understand that they're working for bad guys. We're under that attack. All other ethnic states that have self-value defend themselves, just like the Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh. They don't share the belief that you said. They fight for their land and for what they believe is theirs, their ancient land. And I think we have a lot more similarity to the place that you came from. And I think that you, in many ways, if you would say the things that you said to me, to them, in the same way, they would just say, how could you not defend our peoplehood and allow our people to be slaughtered? That's what we're about. And on top of that, I want to tell you that we are living in a great time, in my opinion, where the Arab world can start to come out of 100 years of hate and into blessings. Our friends today in Morocco, in Sudan, in the UAE, who else? Who else did I forget there? Who else is part of this? Even Mohammed bin Salman, Bahrain. Thank you. And I think Mohammed bin Salman is a forward-looking Arab leader who understands that Israel is an ally, that trying to wipe out Israel and continuing the false Palestinian narrative is not going to bring anybody anywhere. You didn't address what I really spoke to you strongly about the next generation of children and how they're going to continue in this plight if they believe your narrative. I think people like Mohammed bin Salman clearly is tired of this. And that's why he gave flyover rights to Israel, which was obviously a huge signal that the Arab world is tired and done and want to move forward and want to see this region progress. Lies and delegitimization of Israel's right in Judea is not going to bring to anything good for your people. And we're not gonna give up, even with the beautiful Christian ideas of love. We don't think that Christian ideas of love to give up our life to our enemies is so beautiful. We've already had plenty of Christian abuse ourselves, like the Crusades. We know about that love, and when it gets turned on and turned off, we think that our love, which is the idea of the value of every individual person, and really giving. I think I'm saying to you, let's give the next generation of Palestinian children a life, and instead of damning them to eternal war. But I didn't hear you agree to that, and that makes me sad. And that just means that we got to work. You and I got to work more to talk more. Inshallah, we'll meet in the old city of Jerusalem, and in a safe space and coffee shop, and maybe find a separate piece, which will come to a better understanding. I promise you that I'll work on my people to have better understanding for loyal non-Jews that want to be loyal and loving residents of the state of Israel. I promise you to work on that. I have worked on that. I work on that in Hebron as well. And I hope to convince you to drop some of those false narratives and to embrace the country that you live in.
Thank you, Yishai. And before, if you allow me, Adar, just to mention last thing, because it's very important. Moving forward with the next generation, I just hope that the hearer who's listening to you would be also very giving careful attention to what I'm saying. I have a different way. So you're saying giving up on our rights and just acting, okay, whatever Israel does, and not speaking against whatever we feel is mistreating us or abusing our rights is giving them a life? No, that doesn't work. A principle of justice is more important than living with no dignity and with no sense of value. So I
thought you said before that. I thought you said that life was more important than justice. I'm a little confused. Which one is it? The Palestinian version is justice is more important than anything, but the Christian version that you said before is walk away from conflict and accept the reality. Which one do you prefer?
I prefer the following. First, justice. That's just a bit longer discussion. I don't think we have the time, Yishai. We're defining justice differently. You think justice for me is not revenge. Equality, let's call it. Gender equality, human equality, civil equal rights, national rights, equality, equal dignity. That's for me the message to my next generation, that they won't compromise like many Palestinians are doing. They compromise for anything but just for economic gain, for Israel to give them opportunity to work here and there, and this is survival.
Compromise for a decent life to end the war. You don't think it's a good idea. You want justice. More important to keep the war going than to compromise for a better life.
You're still putting things into my mouth, which I haven't said. Okay? I am somebody, you believe in violence. You believe in fighting for a life.
I do not. I believe in defense.
Yes, but you defend yourself through. You don't justify defending by violence, right?
Defense against aggressive enemies. Yes, I believe in defense against aggressive enemies.
You believe in violence? I don't. I'm telling you, even in defense, I would say to Armenian people, who you're surprised, our prime minister did that exactly, because 3,000 or 2,200 people were killed. He said, well, our lives are more important. Let's give up the territory. That's what he did. Okay? So this is, for me, is a wiser decision, because it's protecting Armenian life over territory, because we can't win the war. They thought it through.
So then you can't win the war against Israel. Give up the war, because you're not gonna defeat us, and let's live a life. Isn't that the same logic?
Yeah, but that's what I'm telling you. I don't even believe in a war against Israel.
I think
me speaking against abuses of rights is not creating war, as in physical war. It's creating an equal conversation to bring about rights. Like you said, I'm focusing on bringing the rights of the residents. Last thing, I'm of the residents who want to be residents of Israel. Well, I hope you would focus more on the Hebron, against the Hebron abuses of the children being run over by Israeli settlers, being shot, being stone thrown by Israeli settlers on daily, the shops being vandalized by Israeli settlers. I wish you would care about those Palestinians and you would fight for them, rather than saying Jewish rights. Jewish rights for what? When you are the one who have all the rights. What are you? It's like saying, oh, I want to stand for German rights in Germany, where I have equal rights. This is like a fallacy. You stand for the rights of those who have the rights abused. Not you stand for the rights of
just to make it clear, Malkon, just one thing. I just want to make it clear. Hebron is the richest Palestinian Arab cities, with many, many millionaires, 17,000 shops and factories, with an export of 5 billion shekel a year to Israel. The Jews make up in the region about 10,000 with Kiryat Arba, and there's 200,000 Arabs live in this town. Ironically, also, the town is controlled by Hamas. The head of the town right now, the mayor, is a guy who in 1980 was one of the team of people that shot 6 Jews and murdered them. He's proud of that. He talks about it a lot. Still yet, it's a very powerful city, considered the richest city in the Palestinian Authority, and the Jewish people are about 2 kilometers in about a 20 square kilometer huge Arab city. So, this discussion about the abuses of the Palestinians is, again, part of the false narrative, or the different narrative that Malkon and I see.
Yeah, just to Malkon, just so I could better understand your position. You are against violence, but you don't think Palestinians should surrender. So essentially, what you're advocating for is peaceful resistance. That's what you think the future generation should continue to do until they get to a place where they are equal to Israelis.
Yeah.
Yishai, we can agree that's a commendable approach, and it may have, had that been the approach from the beginning, it may have done Palestinians much better than taking more of a violent, resistant approach. Would you?
Sure. I really don't think it's really that tricky. It's really kind of simple. Accept the idea that you're going to live in peace in our country and follow the rules. Just I'm talking right now, like any tribal chief would say the same thing. Any tribal chief in this whole region.
Would you object to mass protests and you call it civil disobedience, but nonviolent civil disobedience? Would you object to that?
Adar, I'm not gonna go down this rabbit hole. It's completely immaterial. The question is not civil disobedience. The question is actually moving forward in respecting the law and living in this great country and having opportunities. I'm not going to talk about a mass gathering of civil disobedience. If you want to talk about civil disobedience, let's talk about the reality, which has been so hidden in this whole conversation, Adar. And even you, Adar, you really haven't mentioned one simple thing. The Palestinians that I know say to me all the time, we have our mouths shut by this Palestinian Authority. Every time we talk, we get arrested, we get tortured. This is a thuggish regime that represses its own people. It is corrupt. Mahmoud Abbas has $100 million in the bank. It's on Wikipedia. Everybody knows that. They fly private jets. They buy other extra diamonds for the Rolexes. They steal their people's money. They have a police force that is dedicated towards anti-normalization. They throw their people into dungeons in Jericho and torture them. I know victims of these things. This whole business that you're saying to me now, oh, the Palestinians are going to do a protest to get equal rights. It's complete malarkey. What they really want to do.
Well,
wait a second. I have Palestinians coming to me all the time saying, we want to make a massive protest against the Palestinian Authority. Will you protect us? Okay. So I'm not going to entertain this false narrative of a protest against Israel. Let's talk about the real bully in the area.
So, you said you didn't hear me say that. I mean, I don't say 99% of my thoughts because I'm just here to moderate. I'm just trying to provide clarity. But if you want to hear my thoughts, come to the after party in Discord. What I will say on that, though, it's very easy for us to blame the PA. You'll never hear me defend the PA, but in many ways, the PA is just a proxy of Israel. Israel keeps them in power. It's their own government that keeps them in power. So it's like,
I just want one tiny comment on that, Adar, is whenever anybody talks to me about Israeli abuse of the Palestinians, I say, yes, there is one great abuse that we're doing. And that is we continue to allow the Palestinian Authority to rule the Palestinians and support them. That is the greatest abuse against the Palestinians. And with that, I am ashamed to say that in the 90s and the early 2000s, my government helped create the Palestinian Authority, brought terrorists from Tunis and empowered them to suppress Palestinian Arab lives in this region. It was one of the greatest mistakes I'm ashamed to say that there is a truth in what you just said, that this proxy suppresses the Palestinians. If people like myself were ever in Israeli power, we would quickly take down the Palestinian Authority, dismantle the Palestinian Authority, give people residency or maybe Jordanian citizenship, as my wife talked about on this topic on your last debate here, and give people really a forward opportunity. To me, it's one of the greatest shames that the state of Israel created a Palestinian Authority.
I hear you. I think we could, maybe the three of us would agree on that. What I do want to say, one last thought. One of the most challenging things about being a moderator is just not saying what I think, because I love to share thoughts as well. But it's been this role as a moderator has been a great practice at self-control and patience. So, but the reason I put an emphasis on peaceful resistance, because Yishai, you hope that Palestinians just accept Israel as sovereign over the entire land. I agree with you that would be the path of least resistance, right? That would be the easiest for all of us. I don't think that's likely. I think a much more likely scenario is more violence, which entirely against. I think we all are. So when I see somebody like Malkon, a charismatic young man who's speaking for peaceful resistance, I want to be able to highlight that because I think that's an important voice for Palestinians to hear. Young Palestinians are more likely to listen to Malkon than to either one of us.
You don't expect me to back the peaceful resistance against Israel. It's not my role. It's not my job. I would much rather get Malkon on the side of the many, many Palestinians that I meet through the Bayit organization, which you know, which are damn tired of Palestinian Authority subjugation and would like to be normalized within Israel. And how many Palestinian Arabs say, just give me a blue residency card. That's all I want. I want to be able to work and have the protections of Israel and the civil rights of Israel. That's all I really want. I hear that all the time. And I would much rather see a person like Malkon come around and say, hey, Israel's going to give us an opportunity. I have many. I can list you Druze, Palestinians, Israeli Arabs who all think this way, former terrorists who think this way. And in Hebron, for example, the Jabri clan, 40,000 strong. Really, I walk there in great safety love the leadership there. And there's many, I think maybe even, who knows what the number is, but a huge number of Palestinians that want normalization within Israel. I'm not here to be an advocate for civil disobedience against Israel. But yeah, I guess you're right. A more decent conversation is definitely better than Hamas murderous violence.
Yeah, sometimes we got to meet in the middle, but I hear you. I hear you.
One thing, Adar. Look, Yishai, you mentioned a lot of things, and about the Palestinians asking for a blue ID. Of course, well, who doesn't want to be suppressed, mistreated, abused by the
Palestinian Authority?
Yeah, also, but who doesn't want to be oppressed and suppressed and mistreated and abused by the Israeli checkpoints, Israeli soldiers, Israeli military oppression? Who doesn't want? Of course, Palestinians would like that blue ID because it would give them also economic opportunities.
Great.
Of course. Having an economic opportunity is a sense of one right. It's a certain layer of rights, which I agree. Like, for example, we Palestinians of East Jerusalem have more rights than the Palestinians in West Bank. And definitely the Palestinians of West Bank have a bit more rights than the Palestinians of Gaza. But who's oppressing all? Who is in control of all? Above all, the sovereignty, the Israeli government. This is just to point things out in their name. So Israel has the power to do everything. They even issue the green ID to West Bankers through Israel. So Israel has the power to. So in a sense, to put it all on PA, of course, Palestinians, most of them.
No, I'm actually putting it on you. I'm putting it on you. I don't know if you heard me. I said I'm putting it on you because I'm saying if you would preach a doctrine of accepting that we're the sovereign here, you don't have to necessarily love it, but by accepting that, you will have upward mobility in economy, upward ability in freedoms, freedom of congregations, freedom of religion.
I want to comment on that. Bear with me. Exactly, that's what I wanted to comment.
I do want to wrap up, so let's make these final thoughts.
Yishai, it's not about accepting your sovereignty or denying your sovereignty. Israel today exists. Yes, I think it's wise for any Palestinian living at least under what's Israel to realize that Israel exists. Yet we all have the right as Palestinians, whether we live under what's Israel today proper or what's occupied Palestinian territories or you call also Israel, to say we want the right to self-determination. We want to determine ourselves. It's a right according to international law to build our own state and to be sovereign over ourselves, not be sovereign by you, not be under you. Yes? And this is also a place, it's a homeland to us. And we also have roots here. We have the right to say we don't want to leave here and go somewhere else. This is our right, like any human who's born into anywhere.
Not every human has a right to a self-determination of a state. The Chinese people living in Chinatown in New York City don't have a right to call it China just because they're the majority there. I don't disagree with you. You have your right to your houses and your property and your civil rights. But what you're saying is, and it's not exactly clear, why is it exactly that you think you need your own state? There was never a Palestinian state here ever. So why exactly is that so important? And we all know that this Palestinian state would be like Gaza, a Hamas state, a repressive state.
But I feel because Adar wants to finish, and it's very big topic.
We're not covering new ground in here. So
no, we are actually, because suddenly now he's talking about the issue of an ethnic national Palestinian state on this land. This is something that he didn't talk about before. It's an important point. Like, why is it that you want a state here and not equal rights in Israel, but a state? That's something very different.
First, we have the right to have a state. Whether you agree or not, you have the right. Then that's racist. We have
No,
the
it's
right
not
to have
racist.
a
It's just
state.
my land. It's called property rights.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not racism.
It's for us. It's racist. It's greedy. It's selfish. It's exclusionist. It's antagonist. It's aggressive.
I think
it's anti the other.
I think
it's
the Arab
self-centered.
states have
Okay,
plenty of
but
room.
wait for me. I have to answer you, please, Yishai. So
Please.
I gave you space. I did not interrupt you. So last thing to say. First, we have the right to state. Whether you agree, disagree, it's okay. That's a bit longer discussion. Second, we have the right to have equal rights within Israel, whether we want to stay under Israel or not. We have the right for both.
You talk a lot about rights. You don't talk a lot about responsibilities. Rights come with responsibilities. You tell me that you're going to be loyal citizens, then we'll talk about rights. Talk a little bit about not making jihad war against the Jews.
You reminded me. You reminded me.
Thank God.
Oh, when you said we want to accept that Israel is sovereign here, sovereign in what sense? For us, in the West Bank at least, and East Jerusalem, and Gaza in particular, the law that you are calling us to obey is racist, discriminatory, abusive, oppressive. It is racial, and racial discrimination is part of. There's a law in Israel called justified discrimination, and under it comes the marriage laws, the anti-family reunion laws, the blue ID residency laws, and the anti-citizenship laws. So all of that, it's even called justified. How shameful is that? Justified discrimination.
Malkon, just answer me this. Is there any country under your definition in this whole region that is not racist? Just give me one. Like in the whole region here, is there any ethnic national state that you think that's the one that we should be like, that gives everybody democratic rights according to who they are and all that? Is there any equality? Just can you remind me which state you're talking about here? Which was there a Palestine like that? Armenia's like it? Which country are you exactly referring to?
He said, I just also remembered another point, which I will answer this. You said Palestine was never a state. Israel neither was never a state.
You know that's not true, Malkon. You know that Jesus walked in a state of Israel. You know that.
Please wait. There is no state, brothers. Statehood is a new concept.
No, it's not. There was a kingdom. It was like a state today.
Thank you. Kingdom. There was no states. There was empires, kingdoms.
It was a kingdom with a border. It was Israel.
Palestine was a province and a region and was ruled by different kingdoms and different empires. And so what? And why not? And regarding the whole point of finding a country that is an example of you're asking me, of course there is countries like Sweden, for example.
No, I meant in the region. Sweden. That's nice. Sweden's nice. Yeah.
Well, I think we should.
Give me a regional country.
What do you mean? It doesn't matter if it's in the region or not, brother. We aspire to make what's better. I don't care about Arab countries.
But let's have some realism, Malkon. Malkon, if you don't talk realistically, you're dooming the next generation. Malkon, come on. Let's talk about what really is out here.
This is your opinion. I hear you, but I don't.
Sweden is not here.
Anyways,
brother, we are humans. We have the intellect to aspire for the next generation. My example is not the Egyptian governance system, and my example is not the Syrian governance. And those we are against very wholeheartedly, as not only as Palestinians, as any human who has some rationale. Of course, any system that oppresses you, that's dictatorship based, that is, of course, we're not for this. We are for a system that me and you, if I'm going to speak with hopeful and end it with hopeful note and positive note instead of this kind of back and forth, me and you can build together. That's not based on race or ethnicity or superiority or inferiority, but rather equality in our humanity and in the image of God, if that's what we're going to call. And live together in peace. That's true peace. Not a peace that is based on your own conditions and you're not going to compromise.
Right.
We want only the Palestinians to accept your own conditions. That's called superior, arrogant, self-centered, selfish, exclusionist, as I said. And that's terroristic because it's creating fear and trauma in the Palestinian hearts and minds and souls. Thank you.
I'll finish off Adar just by saying, Malkon.
Wait, Yishai, finish up in a way that doesn't require a response on his end, because that's kind of what's happening. Each response. Okay.
And that's only because, Adar, you've created such a wonderful opportunity for conversation. And I think anybody listening to this can feel that there is a true conversation going on here. Yes, there's strong differences of opinion and some name calling. But I think generally, as we started, I think we end that this, I hope it's an enlightening and educational discussion that we've had here. I think I've made my points, and I think that you've heard excellently explained points by Malkon. I would just say to Malkon, brother, I hear what you're saying, but I think that you're forgetting that, and it's weird to me because you really have such ancient blood in you. you're forgetting that the region is the region. It has certain ways, and to completely talk about a revolution of a whole regional attitude, instead of accepting the fact that we have tribal peoples living in tribal land in their tribal ways, and just understanding that, and kind of more like going with the reality of this region, and then helping people flourish. In my mind, I really believe, I'm telling you, this is not some kind of like hasbara BS. I believe this in my mind. There will soon be trains leaving from Tel Aviv, passing through Jerusalem, going to Amman, and from Amman to Riyadh, and from Riyadh to the Gulf. I haven't seen it yet, but soon I'm looking forward so much to see that beautiful water on the Gulf. This region, there's going to be a new city called Neom, and there's going to be a train from Eilat to Neom and from Eilat to Alexandria, and it's going to connect all the way up from Istanbul, from the Eurorail. This is going to become an Abrahamic region. People are going to tour this region. The Jewish state, being amongst a family of Semitic nations here, will flourish. The Arab states will flourish. The minorities that live in this region will flourish. They will realize that the war with Israel is pointless. It's time to, don't poo-poo economic opportunity. It's not something small. It means a better life, better opportunities. It doesn't mean get rich. It means better education, better health, better roads, better sewage. And I think that the whole world is going to come to Jerusalem, to Mecca, to Alexandria, to Damascus, hopefully, and see this ancient historical region. They're going to take delight in it. I hope to God that Armenia gets back the beautiful Ararat mountain range, which is their historic land, which Noah and his ark stopped on. I really believe that there's a future. The way to that future is not to give up on the borders. It's not to give up on the rights. It's not to succumb to the jihadist lingo that is so pervasive. It's the opposite. It's actually to respect the borders, to respect the strength of different countries. My vision is a strong Israel surrounded by strong Arab states working in cooperation, not just Arab, because we said also Sudan and Armenia, etc. There are many other ethnicities in this region that make up a beautiful thing. And if we put down if we respect our borders and our rights, then we could put down our arms. There will be a third temple in Jerusalem, and there'll be other ways to worship God in this region, and people will come from all over the world to pay homage to the God that creates a house of prayer for all nations. And it'll be from this bloody region that will be really a world image, for a world destination to see love and peace and to see God eyeball to eyeball.
I will also end with a beautiful sentence after you, Hadar. Please forgive us. We kept.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Let's hear it.
I will not much try to trigger you. I hope maybe it might trigger you to respond, but please let's finish.
And any response will just have to be in the Discord.
Yes.
The conversation will continue.
I will say this. Thank you for thinking I'm ancient blood. For you, it's important. For me, I dream of bringing what is first. Humanity first, and then ethnicity or nationality or race or, and that's for me the essence, to build a human global family with differences and beautiful differences, to honor those differences as long as they don't step on the foot of the other, on the dignity and the value of others. As long as being a Palestinian does not have to kill a Jew for them to be Palestinian and vice versa, and etc., etc. I put it first for Palestinians, so I don't trigger you. I'm not trying to make you as if the Jews are always the ones who are killing us. So this is what I dream of, regardless of the names of countries. This will always evolve and change. My dream is a human family, to discover first our human identity, for those who believe in a creator, to discover our spiritual, vertical identity, I call it, and then horizontal identity, which is the ethnic, the belonging, the family, and build that uniqueness, as long, again, it does not have to bring war with others. Thank you.
Thank you both. Malkon, I'm not a religious guy, but when you speak, I could tell you really embody the spirit of Jesus Christ. So I just wanted to tell you that. The peacefulness. And Yishai, I don't want to cause offense, because I don't know which Jewish figure I can compare you to, but we could say Moshe Rabbeinu or Yehuda Maccabee with your pride of the Jewish land. Guys, this was great. Obviously, there's still a lot of ground to cover, but it was educational, inspiring. I think the audience learned a lot. The conversation will continue. Brother Malkon, Brother Yishai, it's been a great pleasure.
All right, folks, you are listening to the Yishai Fleisher Show. Thank you so much for bearing with me. That was my debate with Malkon on the great debate with Adar Weinberg and Weinberg. Oh, I got confused. In any case, it was really fun to be with Malkon. You know, he's a smart guy, and I hope that discussion was instructive. I want to also wish you a happy Tu B'Shvat, even if you're listening after Tu B'Shvat. Let's get into that spirit that Hashem has given us this land and given us the opportunity to come back and serve him from his abode. And that's what Tu B'Shvat is really about. Check out my Tu B'Shvat Seder with Malka on all of my social media. It was really fun and special. Malka brought wines and fruits and verses, and we just did the whole thing. So join us there. And I want to thank again the folks that make this show happen. If it's Moshe Herman and Tabitha and Ben Bresky and Yocheved, who's one of our producers, and of course Malka Fleisher and all the guests that show up on the show, and the technology and the network, the Land of Israel Network, and of course the Land of Israel itself and the God of Israel, who brings us back here to serve him in closeness, and all of those opportunities. Thank you, Hashem, for all that, and thank you for being out there. Lots of love and lots of blessings from the Land of Blessings, and Shalom.
Shalom, my name is Jeremy Gimpel. A few months ago, we started an online seminar teaching life-changing biblical wisdom revealed from the original Hebrew and straight from the mountains of Judea. With global instability on the rise, more and more people are turning to God, realizing now they don't exactly know where to look for guidance. The Bible says the guidance will come from the land of Israel. What started as an online seminar has grown into a global fellowship with hundreds of members from over 30 countries. We're participating in fulfilling prophecy as we learn the Bible through the eyes of prophecy, with a focus on what it's telling about us in our lives today. What you will discover is that the wisdom transmitted thousands of years ago is speaking directly to us in our time, right now. Instead of learning the Bible as a religion, it's the Torah of Israel, the living guidance of God. So please join us for our next online gathering and get access to the full library of teachings that the Land of Israel Fellowship is offering. Join now and get an audio series on the prophecy encoded in the book of Joshua, absolutely for free. Just click on the link below or email fellowship@thelandofisrael.com. I don't know how you found this video or what compelled you to click on that link, but I don't believe in coincidence, and I would encourage you to take the next step on your journey toward the Land of Israel. I hope to see you at the Land of Israel Fellowship. Shalom.